Hi everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to see you join me. And don't forget to like and let me know what you think in the comments. Hey, so you're not gonna believe what happened to me last year. Seriously messed up stuff. It was late fall, and I was all into true crime podcasts, right? My name's Jamie Walker, by the way, and I was 29 back then. Anyway, this whole thing went down at Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge in Delaware. Never in a million years did I think my podcast obsession would drag me into something this horrifying. But, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So, I talked my boyfriend, Chris Miller, he was 32 at the time, into coming with me on this camping trip. Chris was like Mr. Survivalist, you know. Grew up camping in the Rockies with his dad, knew all about wildlife, and could navigate the backwoods like nobody's business. Me. I used to be a nurse, but I quit all that to start a true crime podcast. It was actually getting pretty popular, and I was always hunting for fresh stories. Then I heard about these two hikers who vanished in Bombay Hook the fall before. The cops were just like, misadventure, case closed. But something felt off to me. So, I get this brilliant idea. Hey Chris, romantic getaway and podcast research trip to Bombay Hook. He wasn't thrilled. Bombay Hook's got these crazy marshes, sudden high tides, sinkholes everywhere, and practically zero cell service. But I kept pushing, saying we could find a lead for my show, and have some fun too. Eventually, his love for me, and maybe a little bit of that adventure bug, won out. We drove down this skinny back road, past the official park entrances. Instead of parking in the lot like normal people, we went deeper into the marsh. Sun was already setting when we finally set up camp. The air, man, it stank. Like brine and rot, that typical autumn wetland smell in Delaware. But this was worse. Made my stomach flip. We pitched our little tent on this kinda dry patch of ground. Chris, being all prepared, checked our gear flashlights, camp stove, first aid kit, his camera, and my digital recorder for interviews, wink wink. We had a GPS, usually worked great, but we turned it on and bam, signal kept dropping. Chris, he taps the GPS, frowns weird. He says, might have to go old school with the compass and map if this keeps up. Fine by me, I said, trying to sound cool, but let's give GPS another shot. He just shrugs, puts the GPS aside. I click on my recorder for a quick sound check. Crackle. Static. Interference. My recorder only did that if there was a cell phone nearby or some kind of magnetic field. Turned off my phone, tried again. Crackle quieter, but still there. Annoying, but whatever, I let it go. We settled in for the night. Cooked up some instant noodles, gourmet camping. Right after dinner, we sat by this tiny campfire, night closing in all around us. The marsh, it felt alive, like it was listening. Frogs croaking, light fog drifting over the black water. And then, in that haze, just before midnight, I saw it. A black goat, standing all alone, perfectly still, maybe 100 feet away. Big, silhouetted against the moon, horns curving back sharp. Is that a goat? I asked, throat suddenly tight. Chris squints, then nods. Yeah, could be. Feral or escaped from a farm. He kept staring at it. But that's weird, he says. Never seen a goat in a marsh like this. We watched it, like forever, waiting for it to move. But it just stood there, silent, unblinking. Finally we were like, okay. Just a weird goat, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy though. Then I woke up to whispering. Just whispering. Eyes snapped open in the dark, tent walls glowing from the moonlight. Chris was gone. Heart jumped into my throat. Chris, I whispered. Nothing. Whispering kept going, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Inside my head, outside, I fumbled for my flashlight, unzipped the tent, and stumbled out into the marsh. Ground squelched under my boots. Fog was way thicker now, like a white wall. Chris, I yelled over and over, adrenaline spiking, voice echoing in the fog. Felt like forever, and then I saw him. By the water's edge, knee deep in the murky tide, arms just hanging there. Chris, I shouted, relief mixed with fear. What are you doing?
Get out of there!
He didn't move at first. Grabbed his shoulder, and he gasped, like he'd been underwater. I pulled him back onto land, water splashing around his legs. His eyes were all glazed over. Jamie, his voice was shaking. I saw someone out there, someone calling my name in the water. I'm looking into the dark marsh, swirling fog. Nobody's there. Chris, just the moon on the water. He shuddered, hugging himself. It looked like you, I swear. I saw your face. I put my hand on his forehead, worried he was getting sick. He was cold, but not sweaty. Let's get you warmed up. We hurried back to the tent, hands shaking. I relit the camp stove in the tent vestibule. Park safety rules be damned for a minute. Chris just sat there, staring at his muddy boots. Lost in his head, or maybe just scared stiff. Didn't need to ask, I knew he'd heard the whispering too. We finally managed to fall back asleep, somehow, but dawn was a whole new level of messed up. We woke up, and our tent, it was shredded. Along one whole side, synthetic fabric ripped to shreds, claw marks or tears all over it. Rations and water bottles, gun. First thought was animals, right? Raccoons, coyotes. But no footprints. And the cuts, they looked weirdly clean, precise. Chris's face went hard. We can't stay out here without supplies. We gotta get back to the truck. Fine, I said, already wanting to bail. My podcast curiosity was fading fast. But yeah, we needed gear if we were gonna figure anything out. We packed up what was left and started heading back. That's when the compass went nuts, spinning like crazy. Chris tried to steady it against a tree, but the needle just swung wildly. And the marsh, it looked different, like the path we took in had twisted overnight. GPS useless, compass useless. We just trudged forward, hoping we were going the right way. After what felt like forever, we saw something in the distance. Outline of a cabin or shack. Relief washed over me. Maybe we could find someone who could point us back to the road. An older guy greeted us on this rickety porch. Wiry, salt and pepper hair under a beat-up hat, face all lined and weathered. Rubber boots, fishing rod in hand, like he'd just walked out of the swamp. Morning, he says. You too lost? Yeah, you could say that, Chris replied, eyeing him a little warily. I'm Hemlock, the old man says, introducing himself. This is my place. Chris told him our names, explained the tent, the missing food. Hemlock just nodded, all sympathetic like. Lived out here a long while. Hemlock says, fisherman. Mostly. Don't get many customers anymore. These swamps, they got secrets. Swallow you whole if they want. I jumped right in. We're looking into those hikers who disappeared last year. Heard anything about that? Hemlock's eyes flickered, and he sets down his fishing rod. Heard about that. And other things too. People go missing out here more than the news says. His eyes drifted off towards the horizon. You two need to be careful. There's something else in these wetlands. Some call it the devil, evil spirit, demon. I've seen it takes the form of a black goat. But Chris and I exchanged a look. So, it wasn't just a random goat. Hemlock lowered his voice. Real serious now. Don't make a deal with it, no matter what it offers. Bargains out here, they never end well. Was he serious? Had to be local folklore, right? But that goat, it still gave me the creeps. Hemlock offered us some canned food and a place to rest. Storm's rolling in, he says. You can wait it out here or try your luck. But tides rise fast. He pointed to these dark clouds building up. We decided, yeah, shack sounded good. Just to regroup, get out of the swamp for a bit. Thankful for dry ground, even if it was a rickety porch. Hemlock gave us this old blanket, went to get water. I flipped on my recorder again, hoping to get an interview. When he came back, I asked, "What do you know about these or trades? People sacrificing stuff for favors?" He sighed, heavy. "I know this much. Everyone who's tried to cut a deal out here, they lost more than they gained. Sometimes it's their mind, sometimes their life." He stared right at me, eyes all hollow. "Stay away. Just stay away from it." We left Hemlock's shack after a short break, hoping to get around the tide and back to the truck. But as we pushed through the reeds, cold wind picked up, and the tide was already higher, water lapping at our boots. Sky opened up, downpour. Soon we were slogging through water up to our waists. And then the black goat. Back again, standing on a muddy rise in front of us. Staring. Water streaming off its fur, horns curving back. I couldn't shake this feeling it was trying to talk. Not out loud, but in our heads. Heart hammering, thunder booming overhead. Suddenly, Chris jerks his head towards me. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice shaking. "Hear what?" Chris's eyes darted around, freaked out. "It's saying, 'Give me one, and the other shall go free.'" Chill went right up my spine. "Chris, you're scaring me." He looked terrified. "It's in my head. Jamie." We tried to go around the goat, but every time we moved, it moved too, blocking us. Like it was hurting us. Thunder cracked again. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, the goat's eyes, they were glowing. Deep, glinting evil. Finally, we just bolted left, running for higher ground. Found a patch of drier earth, some twisted trees. Clothes soaked, sky almost black. Goat vanished. We stumbled on this other shack. Dilapidated fishing shack, different from Hemlock's. Older, boards missing, smelled like rot. Felt safer than being out in the storm, so we ducked inside. Cramped, dark. Lightning flashed through the walls, and I saw them. Markings carved into the wood. Spirals, runes, shapes I didn't recognize. On a table in the corner, a faded notebook. Crusted red stains on the cover. Stomach churned. I picked it up carefully, flipping through pages. Scribbled handwriting. Grotesque drawings on every page. Symbols of a horned figure, lists of names crossed out, and then this last desperate message. "One must be given." Chris was pacing behind me, breathing heavy. Turned around, and he's gripping his head, like he had a killer migraine. "Chris, what's happening?" Voices, he hissed, eyes squeezed shut. "It's telling me we have to choose." "Stop listening to it," I pleaded, grabbing his arms. His skin was clammy. Tried to check his pulse, but he pulled away, stumbling deeper into the shack. Boom. Massive thunderclap, shack shook, door slammed open. Wind howled in, almost blew out our flashlight. In the flicker, I could have sworn I saw the goat's silhouette outside, eyes gleaming. Then the door slammed shut again. Next lightning flash. Chris's eyes met mine. But his expression, it was different, darker, furious, stomach lurched with fear. Something about him felt off. Like I wasn't looking at my Chris anymore. I don't even remember passing out in that shack, but I must have. Next thing I know, I wake up, wrists tied behind my back, gag in my mouth, some nasty, full-smelling cloth. Whole body shaking, soaked to the bone, slick with mud. I wasn't in the shack anymore. Out in the open marsh. Sky still churning with storm clouds, but the rain had eased to a drizzle. Tried to scream through the gag, just muffled noises. Then I saw Chris, a few yards in front of me, length of rope in his hands, coiling it all slow and methodical. He turned around, real slow, met my eyes, heart hammered in my chest. His eyes empty, like nobody was home, possessed, but by what no idea. He started walking towards me, knife in his hand, long rusted blade. When he spoke, voice strained, like he was fighting to keep it even. I didn't choose this, Jamie, but it's you or me. Tears burned my eyes. I thrashed against the ropes, desperate to get free, but just rubbed my wrists raw. Chris lifted the knife, ran the flat edge against my arm. We made a deal. I can't break it. He squeezed his eyes shut, wrestling with something I couldn't see. I don't want this. Then this thing, the goat's voice, or whatever was controlling him, laughed in the back of his throat. Horrible, strangled sound. Rain dripped from his hair, down his forehead, mixing with sweat. He pressed the blade in, just enough to draw blood. I went suddenly, banshee, gunshot. Rang out across the marsh. Chris jerked, stumbled backwards. Twisted my head, saw Hemlock striding towards us, hunting rifle in his hands. Chris fell to his knees, clutching his thigh. Knife clattered in the mud. Hemlock rushed to my side, cutting my bonds. Jet behind me, he shouted. I scrambled away, pulled the gag out of my mouth, gasping for air. Chris. Then Chris let out this guttural cry, blinking, confused, like he was waking up from a nightmare. But then his body twitched, unnatural limbs jerked. Eyes rolled back, just whites showing. He stood up, fluid, inhuman. Ignoring the blood pouring from his leg, Hemlock leveled the rifle again. Stop, or I'll shoot again. Chris, no, it grinned. Twisted grin. Voice that wasn't Chris's, rasping out of his lips. You will all kneel, thunder rolled. And then the goat. It materialized in the distance. No, not just the goat. Something bigger. Grander, horns longer, eyes blazing with this inner fire. Wind roared, marsh grass flattened around it, like it was controlling the storm. Hemlock pulled the trigger. Shot rang out again. Chris was flung backwards, landing hard in the mud. This time, he stayed down, gasping. I crawled to him, sobbing. Didn't know if he was still possessed, or Chris. Chris pressed my hands to the wound in his chest. Blood everywhere, seeping between my fingers, mixing with the rain. Jamie, he gurgled, eyes focusing on me for a second. Then, like he was back himself, he whispered, run. Before I could say anything, a final spasm ripped through his body. The knife he'd dropped suddenly back in his hand. He drove it into his own chest. Crunch, sickening sound, blood sprayed out. I screamed, trying to stop him. His face twisted in pain, but there was this flicker of relief, too. Like he thought killing himself would break whatever hold that thing had on him. Chris collapsed, eyes blank, just gone. I wailed, cradling him in the pouring rain. ignoring Hemlock yelling. Vision blurred. Deep ache in my chest, like something just broke, for good. Craze, he was my rock, my safe place in every storm. And I'd lost him to some nightmare I never thought was real. The goat knew. That entity let out this thunderous roar. Hemlock dragged me away. He's gone, he snapped, voice choked. We have to move. We stumbled through the swamp for hours, felt like. Storm finally easing up. Every so often, I thought I saw the goat. Heard its voice whispering through the reeds. But maybe it was just my head playing tricks. Finally, headlights cut through the gloom. Figure coming towards us, flashlight blinding. Badge glinting in the beam. Detective Vickers, local PD, he announced. Tone all flat and detached. Ma'am, sir, you need medical attention. Couldn't even speak. Hemlock hovered by my side, protective. Wouldn't let the detective separate us. I wanted to tell him everything. Chris, the goat, the hikers, but my lips felt numb. Detective Vickers pulled Hemlock aside, talking low. Heard bits and pieces. We'll handle it, keep this quiet, official story, she's in shock. When they came back, Vickers guided me to his SUV. Blanket over my shoulders. Hemlock lingered outside, face grim. I noticed Vickers turned off his dashcam. Never asked for a statement. No radio call for paramedics. Only help I got was a sip of water and this forced promise. We're gonna get you cleaned up. Next thing I remember, small office. Borrowed clothes, hair still damp. Detective Vickers staring at me across this metal desk, face unreadable. I'm sorry about your boyfriend, he said. Flatly. We'll file it as a missing persons case. Storms out here can be deadly. Voice shook. He's not missing, he's dead, you saw. Broke off, tears burning. Vickers leaned in, lowered his voice. Listen carefully, you're free to go. But we will not speak of devils, or goats, or possessions. This swamp has enough rumors. We do not need more. Understand? Rage flared up, but I was empty, alive. Battered. Heartbroken. Just needed to get out of there before I lost my mind completely. They let me go. Nurse checked me over, quick once over. No official report, no statement, nothing. No idea what happened to Chris's body. Did they even get it? Burn it. Burylock. Vanished. Staggered out into this grey dawn. Head spinning, exhaustion crushing me. Flood of questions. Why the cover-up? Chris's death. Other missing people. Something bigger going on. Nobody to stop me asking questions now. Called a friend for a ride. Spent weeks in this haze. Nightmares, flashes of something like normal life. My old recorder, Chris's camera memory card. All I had left of that trip. Finally got the guts to check them. Errors. Corrupted files. Most of the audio. Static shrieks. But then one salvageable clip. Chris's voice. Just one sentence. It wasn't me who let you go. Months now. Official story. Chris Millard missing. Presumed drowned in Bombay Hook storm. 2 hikers from last year. Still missing. Files on their case, what I can find, suspiciously thin. Tried to contact Detective Vickers. Nothing. Phone calls drop, emails vanish, evidence it disappears. Keep replaying that last moment in the swamp. Pain in Chris's eyes when he stabbed himself. Sacrificing himself. Final act of defiance. I think by destroying his own body, he stopped the goat. Whatever it is. From taking something worse. Haven't gone back to Bombay Hook. Won't dare. Hear it call in my dreams sometimes. See that black goat standing still in the marsh, watching. Stormy nights, catch a flicker of horns in every shadow. Memory of it all, it haunts me. whispering that I escaped because Chris paid the price. Don't know who else made deals out there in the wetlands. How many more vanished without a trace? But if you ever find yourself in the Delaware marshes and you see a black goat staring at you in the fog, run. Don't look back. Don't listen if it calls your name, because something ancient and hungry lives in those reeds, and it takes what it wants. Wish I had more answers, but this is my life now. Thought about quitting the podcast, but I have to speak, even if they try to shut me down, for Chris, for the others, still clinging to this tiny hope I can find out more. Expose whatever this is. Get some kind of justice for them. Even though, every time I close my eyes, I'm scared I'll open them back in that swamp, staring into the eyes of the black goat, and next time, maybe nobody left to save me. My name's Mark Miller. I'm 32, and I'm telling you, what happened last year still messes with my head. It all went down near the Pocomoke River, Delaware. I swear, I replay it all in my mind, trying to find some way it was just a bad dream. But nope. What I saw, what I did in that Ashburn house, real as anything. I'm a contractor, always have been. Grew up in a super religious family, so ghost stories. Never bought into hard work and what you could see and touch, that was my reality. So when this land developer, Mr. Harding, hired me to fix up this old colonial house by the Pocomoke, my only worry was the usual, budget and getting it done on time. This place, the Ashburn house, everyone around called it that. Been empty for ages, decades maybe. But Harding, he said the structure was solid, good bones. He kept saying, haunted. Yeah, that was the rumor mill. But Harding just laughed at that stuff, and honestly, I figured he was right. I brought Danny Reed with me. Danny's my best friend, business partner too. He's 34, real laid back, always up for a quick job to make some cash and move on. We drove out to the property in our work truck one Friday morning, feeling that chilly fall air. The place was tucked way back in the woods, down this dirt lane that just kept getting skinnier and skinnier. Trees closing in on both sides, like they were trying to swallow the road. Finally, we busted out into this clearing, and there it was. The Ashburn house. Tall, kinda creepy looking, with shutters all wonky and a porch that sagged like it was tired. But it was there. Still standing. For a place supposed to be abandoned for like 50 years, it was weirdly together. We parked, got out, just stared. Man, Danny says, running a hand through his hair, I've worked on old houses, but nothing like this. Looks untouched. He was right. Floorboards should have been mush, right? But they felt solid under our boots. Windows were dusty, yeah, but mostly whole. You'd think it'd been empty a year, not half a century. Harding was supposed to meet us there, but of course, he was late. Typical. We unloaded our gear, truck door slamming shut in the quiet, and went to check the front door. Creaked right open, no problem. Inside was dark. Smelled like old wood, damp leaves, and something elsey, something kinda off. Couldn't place it. Foyer was huge. Fancy staircase going upstairs. I remember shining my flashlight around, dust bunnies dancing in the beam. But the steps, clean. Like someone had just swept them. I started checking the walls, for rot, when I hear this voice behind us. Mark. Sarah Evans. My ex, 30 years old, obsessed with the paranormal. What was she doing here? We dated for a while, years ago. But her ghost hunting thing drove me nuts. always chasing after local legends, filming in graveyards at night, creeping around basements with those digital recorders. Couldn't let you explore the Ashburn house without me, she says, dropping this duffel bag full of cameras and recorders. Rumor is, this place is seriously haunted. Gotta document everything. Danny rolls his eyes, but I'm too stunned to say anything. She just showed up, uninvited. Before I could even tell her to leave, we hear tires crunching on the drive. Mr. Harding, finally. He jumps out of his SUV, all puffed up and important, always in a rush, always checking his watch. Scolds at the house. Good, you're here. Let's get this done. Investors lined up, he says, waving a hand at the peeling paint. Don't care about the ghost stories. Land's worth a fortune if we can fix the place up, prove it's not a total dump. He walks right past Sarah, like she's invisible. Maybe he thought she was part of our crew. Instructions are simple. Harding says, remove rot, new wiring, shore up the foundation. Make it sellable. 1 month, tops, he tells us. We set up a kind of base camp in the foyer. By dusk, the temperature dropped, that swampy Pocomoke smell creeping in. And the silence, deafening. Even the tree frogs outside went quiet. That night, Danny and I unrolled our sleeping bags. Harding, he'd planned to drive back to a hotel, but then decided to stay, get an early start. Sarah, of course, insisted on staying too. Nighttime recordings, you know. We ate some sad sandwiches by lantern light. Harding gives us this lecture about how any weird noises were probably just raccoons or the wind. Then he wanders off upstairs. Danny and I take one last look around. We still hadn't found any real damage. Place was old, yeah, but bizarrely solid. Something about that just felt off. Meanwhile, Sarah's already in the corners, headphones on, recording audio. I crashed on my sleeping bag around midnight, totally wiped. Danny was snoring a few feet away, but sleep didn't last long. Sometime later, I woke up to this faint sound, a kid laughing, upstairs. Soft, but definitely a kid laughing. Heart started pounding. I sat up, looked around. Sarah was gone. Danny was still out cold, snoring away. Alarm bells ringing in my head. I grabbed my flashlight, followed the noise. Second floor hallway. Smelled like fresh cut lumber. Made no sense. My flashlight beam catches something at the end of the hall. Small shape. A little boy. Old-fashioned clothes. Watching me. He looks at me wide eyes, then turns and slips into a dark room. Adrenaline spiked like crazy. I hurried after him. Reached the doorway, boy's gone. Nowhere. Then Sarah pops out of a side bedroom. Almost made me jump out of my skin again. Digital recorder in her hand. Got something on tape. She whispers, all excited. Kid's voice, I think. Did you hear it too? I just nodded, too freaked out to say much. Eventually, we went back downstairs. Danny's still out cold. Harding's sleeping bag was empty. Figured maybe he went out to his SUV for something. But I just felt like we weren't alone in the house. Like that kid was still there, just out of sight. By morning, Harding's back. Rummaging around in the foyer, looking grumpy. Claims he never left. Whatever, no time to argue. We spent the day checking out the basement. First floor. Sarah stayed upstairs, poking around the second floor. She had this knack for finding hidden stuff, compartments, old diaries, that kind of thing. And around noon, she comes barreling down the stairs, clutching this beat up old journal. Slams it down on a dusty table. Danny, Harding, and me gather around. Pages dated 1832. written by some woman, Margaret Ashburn. Entries were about adopting this orphan boy who just showed up one morning, alone in the woods. After he arrived, Margaret's family started losing it. Screaming fits, violent, vanishing acts. Neighbors whispered the kid was a demon. Last entry was almost unreadable, but I made it out. He makes us turn on each other. He is not human. God help me. Harding waves it off. Old superstitions. Locals called every sick kid a demon back then. Don't let it distract you. But still the story, it kinda matched what I'd seen last night. Danny caught my eye, looking uneasy for once. Sarah, though, she was beaming. Flipping through the journal, hungry for more clues. That night, that's when the real weirdness kicked in. The nightmares. Part 2. The house fights back. We were all working in this hallway, doing some demo. Harding's barking orders, push harder, ignore any weird stuff. Then, out of nowhere, the floor under me groans. Felt this jolt. Pieces of wood that were rotten that morning suddenly looked new. Like they'd been replaced. Even Danny mutters, "Man, I could have sworn these boards were totally gone. Now they're fine." Dinner back in the foyer. Sarah's still pushing to stay another night, get more recordings. Danny doesn't argue. Maybe we were all too curious, or too stubborn to just leave. Harding, he makes a big show of pulling out a flask, takes a swig before unrolling his sleeping bag. Early morning, I wake up to frantic screaming, Danny yelling my name. Grab my flashlight, see the front door hanging open, run outside into the cold dark. Truck headlights are on. Danny's standing there, shaking like a leaf. Next to him on the porch, Peter's phone. Screen cracked, video still running. Just blackness, but the audio chilling. Kid's voice, whispering, "Come inside." Over and over. Danny tells me he found the phone just sitting on the porch, screen lit up. No sign of Harding. I yell Harding's name into the woods. Nothing. Sarah rushes out, heart pounding. "Where'd he go? Where's Harding?" She keeps asking. We fan out a bit, flashlights cutting through the trees. Nothing, no footprints, no struggle, no cell signal to call for help. Back in the foyer, we see it. Watery footprints, leading from the basement stairs right to the front door. Small footprints, like a child's. Ours blur together. Danny and I try to start the truck, get to help. Engine just sputters. Pop the hood. Battery's fine. Gas tank's good. Truck just won't start. Woods felt like they'd swallowed us whole. Midday. Dead tired, but we refused to sleep. Combing the house, calling for Harding. Sarah's the one who sees him first. Standing at the edge of the property, half hidden by the trees. Staring right at the house, we yell his name. He doesn't move. We get closer, he's gone. Vanished. No footprints. Nothing to show he even walked away. Back in the house, even more freaked out. Later that night, I find something worse. Windows we'd broken during demo. No longer broken. Boards we'd ripped out, reattached themselves. Like the house was healing. Resisting us, twisted. None of us could explain it. We retreated inside, shoved a shelf in front of the front door. I took first watch. Danny nodded off, leaning against the wall. Sarah paced the foyer, checking her equipment. Around 3 a.m., I hear footsteps on the porch. Slow, measured. Then a soft knock, body froze. Sarah's eyes snapped to the door. Danny stirs, fumbling for the hammer at his side. Knock again. Luder. And a voice, Harding's voice. "Let me in." Carefully, I drag the shelf away. Crack the door open. Expecting I don't know what. holding something else. Instead, it's a kid. The same kid I saw upstairs. He looks up at us, huge, innocent eyes. "I need help," he says. No warning. He just steps inside. We stumble back as he walks past us. Maybe 9 or 10 years old. Pale skin, old-fashioned suspenders, white shirt, hair neatly combed. Looked normal. But every hair on my neck stood up. Sarah tries to speak. Who are you?" He doesn't answer. Just pads across the foyer, stops in a corner, like he's listening to something only he can hear. Then he whispers, "He's still here. Your friend." We turn to him, startled. Danny grabs the boy's shoulder, and the second he touches him, the kid lets out this shriek. Blasted our ears. Like raw energy, just gust of it. Danny staggers back, hands to his temples. House goes silent again. Child walks into the dark hallway, just like that. Gun. Sarah runs after him. Empty hallway. "This is impossible," she mutters, but the tape on her recorder is still rolling. Then, thump. Heavy thud from upstairs. All three of us sprint up to the second floor. End of the hall, dusty bedroom. There's Harding, kneeling by the window. Eyes half-lidded, swaying. "Harding," Danny says, walking slowly towards him. Harding doesn't respond, doesn't even blink. Danny touches Harding's shoulder. Harding whips around. Eyes black. No whites left, just endless darkness. He lunges at Danny, bites down on Danny's arm. Animal ferocity. Danny screams, kicks him away. Harding's panting, crouched in a corner, drool and blood on his lips. Then, in this broken, raspy voice, he says, "I need you to help me." We backed away, terrified. Hallway lights flicker. Then Harding's gone. Just gone. Danny's arms bleeding. We haul ourselves downstairs. Rummage for the first aid kit, wrap it up. Danny's shaking more from shock than pain. "This is insane," he keeps saying. He had no eyes, none. Sarah and I try to calm him down, but we were all too freaked out to think straight. We barricaded ourselves in the foyer again, cursing the house for trapping us. That night, while Danny dozed, I took watch with Sarah. Tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. But arguing wasn't an option. She's fiddling with her cameras, scanning the corners, determined to catch the kid or Harding on video. Sometime after midnight, Sarah gets restless. "Going to check the second floor again," she says. Tried to stop her, but she insisted. Left me alone with Danny, who's asleep against the wall, face pale from blood loss. Must have drifted off, even with the fear eating at me. 'Cause next thing I know, scraping sound wakes me up. Sarah's in the foyer, crouched by Danny, kitchen knife in her hand, eyes distant, muttering. He says we have to do it. We have to. I shout her name. She jerks, like waking up from a trance. Drops the knife, backs away. Danny wakes up with a start, sees the knife, scrambles to his feet. Sarah's blinking, tears in her eyes, shaking uncontrollably. I don't remember picking that up," she whispers. Something was speaking to me through me. Next hour was a panicked mess. Danny wanted to tie Sarah up, for everyone's safety. I told him to calm down. She was clearly possessed or something. But still, she was Sarah, the woman I used to love. Eventually, she agreed to be tied up, just in case. Sat against the wall, her knees pulled to her chest while Danny and I took turns watching her. But the house it had other plans. Around dawn, I realized Danny's gone. Rope around Sarah's wrists cut. She's out cold again. I shake her awake, demanding answers. She just looks at me, bloodshot, terrified eyes. I don't remember cutting myself free, she insists. I search the first floor, panic rising in my chest. Danny's nowhere. Then, in the hallway, I see it. Trail of fresh blood, leading to a door I hadn't noticed before. Old wooden door at the end of the corridor, half hidden by a torn curtain. Led down to a basement. Narrow, one I hadn't fully checked out yet. Flashlight flickering as I go down the steps, echoing off stone walls. Bottom of the stairs, the smell hits me first. Metallic, decaying. Then I see Danny, lying on the cold floor. Nails driven through his palms, pinned him to the floor. Symbols carved into his chest, shallow, but bleeding. He's conscious barely, eyes wide with terror. I rush to him, trying not to throw up, tugging at the nails, hammered deep. From the darkness movement, Sarah, stepping out from behind a wooden post, but different, eyes empty, lips twisted in a grin that was not Sarah. Realized with horror she was under its control too, and behind her the little boy, so still, so silent, watching with a faint smile. Sarah's voice, strangled whisper, "He's mine now." Then she lunges, splintered plank in her hand, swinging wildly, barely ducked in time. Blow connects with the wall, chips of stone flying. Tried to reason with her, useless. Danny's pleading eyes told me he was fading fast. Desperate, I grabbed for the plank. We struggled, stumbling around Danny's body. Sarah's foot slips on the blood-slick floor. Moment to pin her arm. She hisses, "You can't stop him." Face twisted with rage, spittle flying from her lips. Pushes me back with unnatural strength, almost toppling me. Behind her, the little boy flickering. Like the basement light made him shimmer in and out. Watching. Like it was all a sick game. Split second, it hit me. This child not a child. Demon from Margaret Ashburn's diary. Reason the house was healing itself. Reason people vanished, lost their minds. Sarah launches again, slashing wildly at my chest. Dodged to the side. Grabbed a loose pipe on the floor. Swung it, hit her temple with the metal. She sank to her knees, dazed. Moment. Thought she'd snap out of it. Eyes stayed glazed, locked on me with hatred. She came at me again. Screaming, spitting. No choice. Swung the pipe again. Harder. Skull gave a sickening crack. She dropped, motionless, breathing ragged. Hands shaking around the pipe. Guilt and revulsion crashed over me. Dropped to my knees beside her. Hand to her neck, praying for a pulse. Nothing, eyes open, glassy. I'd killed her. No other way. Demon's control made her unstoppable. Didn't make it any less horrifying. Across the room, Danny moaned weakly. Forced myself to leave Sarah's body. Kneel next to him. "I'll get you out, man," I promised. Tears stinging my eyes. Hands shaking, pried out the nails. He screamed with each one. Finally free. Blood pouring from his hands, chest wounds. Tried to lift him. Too weak to stand. Sagged in my arms, barely conscious. That moment, the child spoke. Appeared a few feet away. No longer smiling. "You can't leave," he says, voicey serene. "We need more than one to stay here." Eyes glinted, malevolent. Realization slammed into me. Only one way out. Destroy the house. If it was fueling him, connected to him, maybe I could break his hold. Hauled Danny over my shoulder. Staggering up the stairs, every step like quicksand. House itself wanted me to fail. Top of the stairs. Hallway seemed longer, twisting. Front door gone. Solid wall. Panic. Stumbled around. Found the living room. Broken window from earlier demo. Except not broken anymore. Danny's breathing shallow. Couldn't let him die here. Set him down gently, pulled a crowbar from my tool bag, went at the newly repaired boards over the window, broke them enough to kick out some glass. Fresh air flooded in, squeezed Danny's limp body through the gap, heaved myself out. Moment we were both out, window sealed itself behind us, boards knitting back together like living flesh. But we were on the porch. Thunder rolled overhead, sky angry grey. Holding Danny close, made my way to the side of the house. Truck still dead, no phone service, one hope left, gasoline canisters for the generators. Retrieved them from the truck bed, stumbling, Danny sagging in my arms. Dragged him to safety under a tree. Ignoring the screams in my shoulder muscles, grabbed the canisters, rushed back to the house. Wind picked up, howling in my ears. Poured gasoline along the porch, walls, every corner I could reach in the living room. Tossed the rest of the fuel, ignoring the child's voice in my head. Useless, he said. Stop, he said, thought spinning with fury terror. Flicked my lighter. Flames caught instantly, roaring to life. Smoke filled the porch. Watched the fire spread, devouring the old wood. Moment. Face formed in the smoke, child's face. Eyes wide, furious. Vanished in explosion of sparks. Turned, stumbled back to Danny. Unconscious under the tree. House burned bright. Flames licking up the walls, roof collapsing in on itself with deafening roar. Wanted to run to the basement. Sarah's body. Too late. Demon used her to kill me. Or used me to kill her. Lost her either way. Flames consumed everything. Child's voice. Nightmare. Stood in the rain, drenched, half delirious, clutching Danny's limp form. Then authorities showed up. Black SUVs rolled onto the property. Men in suits jumped out. Federal agents. Rushed to the blaze. Professional calm, like they expected this. Dreamlike. Took Danny from me, loaded him into a vehicle. Another agent whisked me away, he said. Remember yelling, "Demon in that house. People are dead." Exchange glances, anything but surprised. Later, local fire department arrived. Overheard the suits talking. Nothing left of the structure. No bodies recovered. Demanded to know about Sarah. Harding shook their heads, hallucinating my crew, figment of my traumatized mind. Next week blurred. Psychiatric facility, locked away for evaluation. Doctors asked me to tell my story. Nodding sympathetically, writing notes. Danny Reed didn't exist. Insisted he did. Grown up together. No record of Mr. Harding acquiring the Ashburn house. Why'd I burn down an abandoned property? No reason. Babbled about a child demon, missing friend, possessed ex-girlfriend. Psychotic break, they said. House, local legend, not a real place. Demanded to speak to Danny. No one by that name in custody. Evidence, phone, camera footage, gone. Suits UVs. Didn't exist in official files. Months now. Discharged therapy condition. But I know what I saw. Late nights. Still hear the child's voice in my dreams. Whispering, "You can't leave." Sometimes, sound of Sarah's skull cracking under the pipe. Jolt awake in cold sweat. Yesterday, walking down the street near the clinic. Kid with suspenders, lamp post. Pale, dark hair, neatly combed. Staring at me. Faintest smile. Stepped behind the post. Reached it gone. They want to convince me it's all in my head. Ashburn House never existed. Can't forget, real. I burned it down. Lost my best friend, woman I loved, inside those walls. Swits. Cover. Up, can't change what happened. Demons still out there. Somehow free. Wonder if the house was just a shell. Now it's gone. He's untethered. Roaming the place he haunted. That's my story. ends with me here, alone, trying to prove to myself I'm not insane. Nightmares come often. Child at the foot of my bed, smiling, endless black eyes. Close mine, whisper a prayer. Haven't prayed since I was a kid. Only thing left, darkness, hear echo of that gentle voice. He's still near. Used to be sure about everything. Hard facts, physical labor. Sweat, sawdust. Now, not sure of anything, except one truth. Ashburn House wasn't the evil vessel, nest. Thing inside found a way out. Doctors can't make me believe otherwise. If you're ever near the Pocomoke River at dusk, think you see a young boy wandering alone, do yourself a favor. Turn around. Don't listen to his voice. Don't look in his eyes. And for God's sake, don't follow him inside. 'Cause once you do, you might never leave. Months now. Discharged, therapy condition. But I know what I saw. Late nights. Still hear the child's voice in my dreams. Whispering, "You can't leave." Sometimes, sound of Sarah's skull cracking under the pipe. Jolt awake in cold sweat. Yesterday, walking down the street near the clinic. Kid with suspenders. Lamp post. Pale dark hair, neatly combed. Staring at me. Faintest smile. Stepped behind the post. Reached it gone. They want to convince me it's all in my head. Ashburn House never existed, can't forget. Real. I burned it down. Lost my best friend, woman I loved, inside those walls. Swits. Cover up can't change what happened. Demons still out there. Somehow free. Wonder if the house was just a shell. Now it's gone. He's untethered. Roaming the place he haunted. That's my story. Ends with me here alone. Trying to prove to myself I'm not insane. Nightmares come often. Child at the foot of my bed, smiling. Endless black eyes. Close mine, whisper a prayer. Haven't prayed since I was a kid. Only thing left. Darkness, hear echo of that gentle voice. He's still near. Used to be sure about everything. Hard facts, physical labor. Sweat, sawdust. Now, not sure of anything, except one truth. Ashburn House wasn't the evil vessel, nest. Thing inside found a way out. Doctors can't make me believe otherwise. If you're ever near the Pocomoke River at dusk, think you see a young boy wandering alone, do yourself a favor. Turn around. Don't listen to his voice. Don't look in his eyes. And for God's sake, don't follow him inside. 'Cause once you do, you might never leave. Name's Mickey. I'm 35. This whole crazy thing went down last fall. Picture this, the boonies, Delmarva Peninsula in Delaware. Total middle of nowhere woods, right? That's where I'd been living off the grid for like half a year. Needed to ditch my old life, you know. Especially after the army gave me the boot, dishonorable discharge and all that. The quiet out there, just trees and crickets, was supposed to be my chill pill, my way to get my head straight. At first, it kinda was. But then something else started hanging around in those woods. Something way weirder and scarier than any enemy I ever faced in uniform. I'd built myself a tiny cabin on this patch of land I bought with what little cash I had left. Nothing fancy, just a box really. Wood stove for heat, caught rainwater to drink, and a solar panel that barely powered a lantern. Days were simple: chop wood, fish in the creek, maybe bag a rabbit or squirrel. I got used to the quiet, the dead stillness that creeps in after dark. Too used to it, maybe. Living alone, I guess I let my guard down. About 6 months in, the nights started getting weird. Noises. Strange calls that sounded almost human. At first, I told myself it was just the wind playing tricks, or some weird animal sounds. But sometimes, man, it sounded like my own voice echoing back at me. Freaked me out, no lie. My brain tried to be all logical: bird, coyote, whatever. But deep down, a little alarm bell started ringing. Told myself not to get spooked. I'd been through worse, right? Army training and all that. Then, out of nowhere, my old buddy Danny shows up. Crisp fall morning, and there he is, trudging up my dirt path, backpack and all. Danny and I did our time together in the army, but we went our separate ways after I got discharged, and he retired with medals and all that. He stood there at the edge of my clearing, gave me this weak smile that tried to hide something: desperation, maybe. "Mikey," he says, voice all shaky in the cold air. "Heard you were hiding out here. Thought I'd drop by." Man, I was torn. Part of me wanted to tell him to get lost, keep my peace and quiet. But a bigger part, the lonely part, was just glad to see a familiar face. I waved him in. And that's when I saw he wasn't alone. Another dude was trailing behind him, a few steps back. Skinny guy Carl, with these sharp, darting eyes and a nervous twitch. Danny introduces him as some hunter he met at a bar. Didn't like Carl's vibe at all, but I tried to be cool. They said they were on a hunting trip, needed a place to crash for a couple of nights. My cabin was tiny for 3 people, but we squeezed in. Over a kinda awkward dinner, Danny let slip he's in deep with some bad people. "Debt," he mumbled. "Needed to disappear for a while." Carl didn't say much, just kept smirking whenever Danny said too much. Man, the air in that cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Next day, I'm checking my snares, just doing my usual routine, and I stumble on something nasty: a dead deer. But not just dead, messed up. Face ripped clean off. Left to rot right near the edge of my property. It wasn't like any animal attack I'd ever seen. This was precise, deliberate, like someone or something wanted to send a message. My stomach flipped. I got this cold, sick feeling, mixed with anger. Dragged the carcass off, buried what I could. Part of me wondered if Carl had something to do with it. Hunter, right? That evening, things got even weirder. We got a visitor. Sarah, wildlife researcher, she said, had a camp set up a few miles away. She comes up to the cabin real slow, hands up, like she was scared we'd shoot her or something. She explains she's been studying the deer around here and noticed some messed up stuff. Poaching maybe, or something unnatural. Something unusual is going on, she says, voice trembling. Several animals mutilated. I've seen the bodies, documented them. But I've never seen anything like this. Then she starts warning us to get out of the woods, talking about strange encounters, voices, sightings of some creature that copies people. Carl just laughs her off. Danny shrugs, acts like he doesn't care. But me, I'm listening. My own weird experiences started flooding back. The voice at night, sounding just like me. Those footprints I found around the cabin, that weren't mine. Couldn't explain any of it. That night, that's when everything went properly sideways. The 3 of us, Danny, Carl, and me, are huddled around the wood stove, trying to stay warm. Winds howling, rattling the cabin walls. Around midnight, I hear it. A voice outside, calling my name. Mikey. Sounded exactly like me. Same voice, same way of talking. Goosebumps all over. I look at Danny. He's pale as a ghost. Carl is grinning like some kind of sicko. Without saying a word, I grab my rifle, yank open the door. Moon's out. lighting up a small patch of clearing. But nothing there. Not a soul. The voice comes again, from deeper in the woods. "Mikey, come here. My heart's pounding like crazy. No person, no animal, should sound that much like me." Then, from the trees, I hear this rustling sound. Not normal rustling, like leaves moving in some weird pattern. Danny's right behind me now, pistol in his hand. We're staring into the dark, frozen. Then Carl, annoyed, flicks on a flashlight, waves it around like an idiot. Nothing. Just shadows playing tricks. Next few days, the tension in the cabin was about to explode. Danny finally spills the beans. Carl ain't just some random hunter. He's the muscle. Danny owes him money. That's why they're together. Explains their whole messed up body act. Carl starts getting bolder, just helping himself to my stuff, my supplies. At first, I let it slide. Didn't want to start a fight. But then, one afternoon, I catch him trying to pry open my lockbox. The little one where I keep some spare cash, a few old photos, personal stuff. "What the hell are you doing?" I yell, voice bouncing off the cabin walls. Carl spins around, pulls out a hunting knife, like it's no big deal. "Don't you talk to me like that," he snores. "You don't know who you're dealing with." And he lunges at me, knife flashing. I sidestep, slam him against the wall. We're wrestling for the knife. He manages to slash my arm before I twist his wrist, make him drop the damn thing. Then it's just fists flying. Years of army training kick in, but Carl fights dirty. Bites, claws, anything to hurt. Danny stumbles in from outside, sees the chaos, pulls a gun on both of us. "Stop," he yells, eyes wide, crazy. "I'm not watching you two kill each other." Blood's dripping from my cut. Carl's nose is bleeding. We back off, glaring at each other. Right then, I realized how screwed things were. My peaceful hideaway had turned into a ticking bomb of fear and mistrust. That night we heard screams. Terrified screams coming from outside the cabin. We grab flashlights, guns, rush out, half expecting to find some animal in a trap. Instead we find Sarah, tied to a tree, unconscious, weird symbols carved into the bark all around her. Clothes torn, face pale as death. But she was breathing. We cut her loose. She blinks, looks around confused. How did I get here?" She whispers, clinging to me, shaking like a leaf. We get her inside. None of us saw who did it. I wanted to point the finger at Carl. He had the crazy eyes, the mean streak. But even he looked genuinely freaked out. Sarah, she remembers nothing. Just stepping out of her own little shack to check a noise. Then black. The next day, Danny's gone. I wake up, expecting to hear him banging around making breakfast. Sleeping bags empty. Hours go by. Dusk. I find footprints leading away from the cabin, lose the trail near a muddy creek. Forest is dead silent. Then, out of nowhere, Danny just reappears. Right outside the cabin door. Clothes soaked, muddy. But something's off. His eyes darker somehow. Smile too wide, too stiff. Barely talks when I ask where he's been. Just mumbles, walking. Then he just stands there, at the doorway. Won't come all the way in. Like he's waiting for permission. When I insist he come inside, his movements are jerky, weird. Like a puppet with tangled strings. Then he lunges. Hands around my neck, clamping down. Strength unnatural, squeezing. Black spots dancing in my vision. I elbow him hard in the ribs, twist free. He staggers back, but comes at me again, snarling. Face all twisted up, rage or something else. something I couldn't name. Sarah screams, grabs a heavy pot, slams it against Danny's head. He stumbles, then bolts, runs off into the night. We slam the door, barricade it. Fear pumping through our veins. Morning comes. Carl's gone too. We find him soon enough. Grisly sight, hanging from a tree branch near the creek. Torso slashed open. Face stretched in this awful grin, like he was in agony. Looked like he'd been dead for hours. But I swear, as I got closer, I heard him whisper my name, Mikey. My stomach churned, nausea hit me hard. Sarah grabs my arm, whispering frantic. We gotta go. Now. We're rushing back to the cabin to pack up, get out of there. Then we hear it, footsteps behind us. My mind races. Could Danny have done this to Carl? But then I remember Danny's weird behavior, the blank stare, the crazy strength. Was that really Danny? Or something else wearing his skin? Inside the cabin, Sarah just collapses. Knees buckle, eyes roll back in her head. Seizure, I think at first. Then she lets out this ragged gasp. Voice changes deeper. Not human. I watch in horror as she reaches for the axe by the wood pile. Stumbles to her feet. Sarah, I say soft. Heart pounding. She turns to me. Face of pure evil. No warning. She swings the axe. I jump back. Blade misses me by inches, slams into the wall. She hisses. Face twisted with rage, yanks the axe free. I raise my hands, trying to defend myself, not wanting to hurt her. She attacks again. Axe whistling through the air. I dodge, feel a sharp pain in my bad arm. Last chance. I tackle her, wrestle her to the ground, pin her wrists. She fights like a wild animal. Eyes now this sick, yellow color. Staring right into mine. Then, just as fast as it started, something flickers in her eyes. She blinks, tears welling up, stares at me like she just woke up from a nightmare. Mikey. She gasps, dropping the axe. Oh God, what's happening to me? I pull her into a shaky hug. Neither of us has a clue what's going on, but we both know. We're in deep, deep trouble. The cabin felt infected. Some terrible presence. One thought screaming in my head. We gotta get out of here. We grab what supplies we can carry. Plan's simple, get back to the main road, find help. But when we step outside is symbols. Strange symbols carved into the ground all around the cabin. Circles, interlocking patterns. Never seen anything like it. Dozens of small animal bones scattered around, arranged in lines. Like someone, something. Spent the whole night setting a trap. I wanted to believe it was just some messed up human doing all this. But the evidence it pointed to something else. Something beyond reason. Something that could copy voices, wear people's faces. Skinwalkers. I'd heard the stories, Navajo legends. Shape-shifting creatures of the night. But that was Southwest stuff. Nowhere near Delaware. And yet, every fiber of my being screamed, that's what we were dealing with. Some evil thing that defied everything I knew. We pushed through the woods, adrenaline and fear burning in my gut. Sarah stayed close, still shaking. Forest was too quiet. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made us jump, waiting for that monster version of Danny to jump out. But we saw no one, not until we hit the dirt road leading out of the woods. There they were, 3 guys, standing in the road. Dark tactical gear, rifles, no patches, no flags, but the way they stood, the gear they had, federal agents. FBI, maybe, or something even spookier. Put down your weapons. One barks, voice crackling through a headset. Sarah and I freeze, raise our hands, drop our rifles and packs. Another agent comes towards us. waving this device around. Looked like a Geiger counter or something. Mutters something into his radio. They take everything. My rifle, Sarah's camera, our phones. Usher us into the back of a black SUV. No explanations. Just exhaustion and desperation. We didn't resist. Thought they'd take us to the cops, a hospital. Nope. Drove for almost an hour. Ended up at some gated compound, hidden deep in pine woods. High fences, guard post. Some kind of facility. They split us up right away. Last thing I saw before they dragged me down a hallway was Sarah's terrified eyes. They put me in a small room, interrogation style. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Woman in a black suit walks in, sits across from me, just stares, for a full minute. Then she finally speaks. Tell me exactly what happened out there. I tell her everything. Danny and Carl showing up. The voices. The deer carcass. Sarah getting snatched. Danny disappearing, coming back wrong. Carl's body. Sarah changing. Voice shaking when I get to Danny's eyes. How they looked inhuman. Woman listens, face like stone. Then she leans forward. You're a trained soldier, Mr. Graves, she says, voice calm, steady. You know how to observe your surroundings. Are you absolutely certain of what you saw? Wes, I insist, I'm sure. She nods, short, curt, and leaves. Hours pass, eyes drooping, exhaustion taking over. Door opens again. Man in a black suit this time. Same questions, different order. Trying to trip me up, catch me lying. I stick to the truth. Eventually, they leave me alone again. Didn't see Sarah again. Didn't see Danny. Just stuck in that room. Bare table. My own fear eating me alive. Then, finally they release me. No explanation. No apology. Just shoved me back into a black SUV. Dumped me at a rest stop near a highway, outskirts of Delaware. Driver just says, here. Hands me a small envelope with some cash, a piece of paper. You are not to return to that property. This is a matter of national security. No stamp, just that. Wait, what about Sarah? I ask. But they just drive off, leaving me standing there in the parking lot, stunned. All I could do was find my way to a cheap motel, buy some clothes, try to figure out what the hell to do next. My brain was a mess. So many questions. Was Sarah still alive? Did that thing kill Danny? Had I just escaped something way worse than death? Or was I just some pawn in some government cover-up? Days turned into weeks, life became a blur. Tried calling the local cops, got nowhere. Federal agencies, automated replies, polite stonewalling, missing person report for Sarah. Nothing. Danny call, like they never existed. A few nights after they let me go, I'm holed up in this cheap motel off Route 13. Nightmares messing with my head. Danny's face, twisted in that grin. Sarah's eyes rolling back, swinging that axe. Midnight. Stepped outside to clear my head. Air was cool. Parking lot lit by one flickering light. That's when I saw him. Standing under the buzzing lamp. Same clothes he was wearing when he vanished in the woods. Danny, eyes hidden in shadow. But his mouth curved into a slight smile. My breath caught. My mind screamed, couldn't be him. Not the real Danny. But there he was. Or something pretending to be him. He didn't move. Just watched me. Horror and grief just exploded inside me. I stumbled back, almost tripped over the curb. Looked up again. He was gone. No place to hide in that empty parking lot. But he was just gone. Never went back to that cabin. Never will. Whatever happened out there in the Delmarva woods, it's buried in classified files, or worse, wiped clean. Sometimes, When I can't sleep, I wonder if I imagined it all. But then I remember Carl's knife, cutting my arm. The smell of his body hanging from that tree. Sarah's scream. Those things were real. They happened. I found a cheap apartment in a city nearby, trying to rebuild my life. But I'm haunted by that voice calling my name in the woods. My own voice luring me deeper in. And by that last image, Danny, or whatever it was, standing under that motel light, smiling, like it knew everything I was thinking. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I hear footsteps outside my door. I grab the baseball bat I keep by my bed. Listen, heart pounding, waiting for the doorknob to jiggle, the window to creak. So far, nothing's broken in. But the fear, it never leaves, because I know it's out there. Demon, shape, shifter, whatever the hell it is. It's got my face, my voice, my memories, and worst of all, it's free. Walking among us, leaving horror in its wake. So, that's my story. Started as a getaway, a quiet life. But in the deep woods of Delmarva, I found something you can't reason with. Can't fight with guns. Something that wore my friend's face. Tore apart another man. Took over a woman who just wanted to study animals. Something the government, whoever they really were, didn't want anyone to know about. And I'm scared. Scared that as long as it's out there, no one's safe. I'm telling you this now. Hoping, if you ever hear your own voice echoing in the dark, you won't be curious. You'll turn around. Run like hell. Because once it sees you, once it knows your name, there's no telling how it'll end, or what you'll become by the time it's done with you. So, yeah, that's where part 1 ends, right? Me, standing in that crummy rest stop parking lot, holding that stupid note about national security, wondering if Sarah was even alive. Man, my head was spinning. Just gone. They just drove off and left me there. First thing I did was try to call Sarah's number, straight to voicemail. Tried Danny. Nothing. Carl. Huh. Like I even had his number. Then I tried calling the local cops in Delaware. Told them about Sarah, missing person. They were polite, took down the info, said they'd look into it. Yeah, right. Felt like they were just humoring me. Called the FBI tip line, figured national security, maybe they'd listen. Got passed around. Automated messages. Finally some bored sounding dude who basically told me to get lost unless had some actual evidence. Evidence. Dude. I had a body hanging from a tree and a shape, shifting monster. But, yeah, no evidence you can put in a report, right? Started digging online. Tried searching for Sarah Holt, wildlife researcher, Delaware. Nothing came up. Danny Price, Army retiree, Delaware Zippy. Carl Walker, hunter, Delaware. Nada. It was like they were ghosts. Like they never even existed. Freaked me out even more. Was I losing it? Was any of that real? Few nights later, I'm in this dumpy motel room. Cheap place off Route 13. Couldn't sleep. Nightmares were on repeat. Danny's face. All wrong. Sarah with those yellow eyes, swinging that axe. Kept seeing Carl hanging from that tree. Just couldn't shake it. Around midnight. I'm restless, gotta get out of that room. Step outside, just to breathe. Air's cool. Parking lot's empty except for a couple of beat-up cars. One flickering light, buzzing overhead, casting these long, creepy shadows. And then I see him. Standing right under that light. Danny. Wearing the same clothes he had on in the woods. Same backpack slung over his shoulder. My breath just stopped. Heart slammed against my ribs. My brain screamed, no, no way. But it was him. Or something that looked exactly like him. His eyes were hidden in shadow, face mostly dark under the brim of his hat. But his mouth, yeah, I saw that, curved into a smile. Not Danny's smile. Something else. Something knowing, evil. My blood ran cold. Couldn't move, just stared at him. Horror, grief, everything just mixed up inside me. I stumbled back, tripped over the curb, almost fell. Got my balance, looked up again. Gone. Just gone. Empty parking lot. No place to hide. Vanished into thin air. That was it. I was done with Delaware. Packed my bag, what little I had left, and just drove. Didn't even know where I was going. Just away. Away from those woods. Away from that motel. Away from him. Or it. Never went back to the cabin. Never will. Whatever happened out there in the Delmarva woods, it's buried. Classified files, government secrets, who knows? Maybe wiped from the face of the earth. Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I start to doubt myself. Did I imagine it all? Was it just stress, PTSD, whatever? But then I remember the feel of Carl's knife, slicing my arm. The stink of his dead body hanging from that tree. Sarah's scream when that thing took over. Those were real. They happened. No way I made that up. Ended up in a city a few hours away. Got a cheap apartment. Trying to start over. Rebuild my life. Whatever that means now. But it's hard, man. Haunted. Every shadow, every noise at night, I hear that voice in my head. My own voice. Calling my name in the woods. Luring me in. And I see that last image of Danny. Or the thing that looked like Danny. Standing under that motel light. Smiling. Like it knew all my secrets, all my fears. Some nights I still wake up sweating, heart racing. Convinced I hear footsteps outside my door. Creaking floorboards, whispers. I grab the baseball bat I keep by the bed, just in case. Listen to the silence. Heart pounding. Waiting for the doorknob to turn, the window to shatter. So far, nothing. Nothing's broken in. But the fear, it's always there. Underneath everything. Because I know it's still out there. Whatever it is. Demon, skinwalker, shape shifter, I don't know. Don't care. Just know it's bad. Real bad. It's got my face, my voice, my memories. And it's out there, free, walking around, looking like anyone else. Leaving a trail of horror behind it. So, that's my story. Started as a retreat. Escape from the world. Wanted to live simple, quiet. But in those deep woods of Delmarva I found something else. Something you can't fight. Can't reason with. Something that took the shape of my friend, ripped apart a stranger, possessed a woman who just loved animals. Something the government didn't want anyone to know about. And I'm telling you now, hoping, maybe it'll help someone. Maybe it'll save someone. If you ever hear your own voice calling you from the dark, don't be curious. Don't go towards it. Turn around. Run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because once it sees you, once it learns your name, there's no telling what'll happen. Or what you'll become when it's done with you. Just run. My name's Jake Harrison. I'm 28, used to be military, and I was the kind of guy who laughed at ghost stories and witch tales. Yeah. Ex-military, tough as nails, you know the type. Never believed in any of that spooky stuff, until I got smacked in the face with it. Last fall, in the middle of nowhere, Cypress Swamp in Delaware, that place messed me up bad. Even now, trying to explain it feels like trying to describe a dream you can't quite remember. But the feeling sticks with you, cold and clammy. It changed everything for me, for real. So, I'd just gotten out of the Marines, needed a break from all the war zone madness. You know, contract security jobs were easy money, kept me busy, but it was boring. Then my old buddy, Danny, we've called him Danny since forever. Real name Daniel, but nobody uses it. Danny hits me up about something unique. Turns out, he and this journalist chick, Maya Reed, were digging into some weird disappearances out in the swamp. Maya, she was writing some big exposé, all about local legends, especially this old witch story everybody whispered about. Witch story? Yeah, I rolled my eyes too. Sounded like a load of crap. But honestly, I was restless. Security gigs were paying the bills, but my brain was itching for something else. Something with a pulse. So, when Danny pitched it, I was half in before he even finished the sentence. First time I met Maya, I could tell she was intense. 30 years old, maybe, sharp as a tack, and those eyes, man, they saw everything. Like she could peel back your skin and read your soul. Danny, my childhood pal, was all sunshine and smiles, Mr. Enthusiasm. Playing middleman for Maya's big break. He made it sound like a weekend camping trip. Few days in the swamp, Jake, remote spots. You know, where nobody goes. Just looking for stuff. Stuff to prove this witch is real. They didn't just call her a witch, though. They had a name for her. Some weird word, the Bruxa. Sounded like something out of a bad horror flick. But like I said, I was in. Told them I'd handle the navigation, security, you know, the ex-Marine thing. Didn't realize just how screwed we were until we all crammed into Maya's beat. Ups UV, and headed straight for the swamp's guts. Our gear, junk. Cheap tents that probably leaked. Rations that looked like they'd been sitting on a shelf since the 80s. A map that was older than me, and a GPS that wouldn't hold a charge for more than 5 minutes. Danny, of course, swore he had extra batteries, empty bag. Typical Danny, big ideas, zero details. First day, we set up camp on a patch of ground that was mostly dry, surrounded by these monster cypress trees. Swamp water, all murky and dark, glinted in the afternoon sun, and the air thick enough to choke on, buzzing with mosquitoes the size of my thumb. Maya, bam, camera out, filming everything, knotted roots, hanging moss, the whole freaky swamp vibe. Danny, cracking jokes, trying to keep the mood light. But as soon as dusk started creeping in, I got this bad feeling, like something was watching. That night, the noises started. Swamp's never quiet, right? Frogs croaking, water dripping, branches groaning in the breeze. But around midnight, it went dead silent. Like someone hit the mute button on the whole world. I was wide awake, listening. Maya was in her tent, probably glued to her camera footage. Danny was snoring his head off in the tent next to mine. And then I heard it. Sounded like my own voice, whispering from the trees. Soft, urgent, like it knew me. Jake, come here. Gave me the chills, man. I jumped up, unzipped the tent, flashlight in hand. scanning the darkness. Flickered once, twicey damn thing was dying on me. Of course, nothing moved out there. Just black trees and that heavy, silent air. Maya poked her head out of her tent. What's going on? I just shook my head. Didn't want her thinking I was some scaredy cat. Next morning, we went deeper. Maya was dead set on finding this cursed clearing from the old stories, place where nothing grows, she said. Perfect footage, maybe some creepy shots for her story. Couple hours in, we stumbled on it. And it turned my stomach, bones. Dozens of them. Scattered on the mud, arranged in these weird spiral patterns. Not just animal bones either. I saw something that looked like a human leg bone. Femur, Maya gasped. Camera up, filming. Then it went nuts. Screen went all static, cracking lines across it. She smacked it hard, trying to fix it. Screen flickered back on, but the memory card wiped clean. Everything she'd just recorded, gone. This is insane, she muttered, shaking the camera like it was gonna magically fix itself. Danny frowned, staring at the bones. Bones don't just arrange themselves like this. He looked at me, like I had the answers. I didn't. We should turn back, I told them, right then and there. But Maya, stubborn as a mule. No way, I need evidence. There's a story here, something big. People vanish in this swamp, Jake decades, no answers. So, like an idiot, I shrugged, agreed to keep going. Told myself I'd see them through, keep them safe, then we'd get the hell out, story or no story. Later that afternoon, we found it. A shack. Rotting, half sunk in moss and vines, looked ancient. Danny, always the curious one, pushed open the door. Rotted wood groaned. Inside, more bones. Crude carvings on the walls, symbols I didn't recognize. And an altar, plastered with old photos. Faces of people who'd gone missing over the years. I recognized one guy from a local news report, just months ago. Disappeared in Cypress Swamp, never found. We left that shack fast. But not before Danny, sneaky bastard, snagged something off the altar. Small silver pendant. Odd symbols on it, like the carvings. Might need this, he said, flashing a sheepish grin. Clue or something. I just shook my head. That's how horror movies start, Danny, you know that. Night fell again. Dread, thick and heavy, settled with it. We camped on another dry-ish patch, but that uneasy silence came back. Not a single bug buzzing. The whole swamp felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. Around midnight, I woke up to a scream. Blood-curdling scream. Grabbed my flashlight, ripped open my tent. Maya was outside, light shining on Danny. He was thrashing on the ground, eyes wide open, but empty, unseeing, and he was talking. Portuguese. Something about Darrow sang. Give her blood. Just fragments. But it chilled me to the bone. Danny. Portuguese. Never spoken a word of it in his life. Maya looked at me, face white as a sheet. What's happening to him? I had no clue. We tried to calm him down, but it was like he was in a trance. Then, just as suddenly, he stopped shaking, blinked at us. I'm fine, he said, voice flat dead. Sorry. Bad dream. His eyes hollow. Next morning, Danny was different, withdrawn, sullen, muttering about that shack, the altar, over cold granola bars, no fire, remember? He insisted on going back. I have to give her something, he said, eyes distant. Maya put a hand on his shoulder. Give who something, Danny? He looked at her like he didn't even know her. Then, just like that, the weirdness blinked off. I don't know, he mumbled. Might just be tired. But that weirdness, it never really left him. We kept going, deeper into the swamp. Maya in the lead, me watching our backs, scanning for predators, human or animal. Late afternoon, we realized Danny was gone. Vanished. 1 minute behind me, next minute, poof, gone. We retraced our steps, yelling his name. Only clue, footprints. Leading to a patch of muddy water, then nothing. Footprints stopped. No sign of him on the other side. We waited till dusk, yelling, searching. Nothing but the mocking rustle of cypress trees. Panic started to set in, cold and clammy, like the swamp air. I'd been in war zones, seen my share of messed up stuff. But this felt different, personal. Danny was like a brother to me. Darkness swallowed the swamp. We gave up for the night, set up camp again. Figured we'd start searching again at first light. Built a small fire, using whatever dry wood we could scrounge up. Humidity be damned. Maya didn't say much. Guessed she was blaming herself for dragging us out there. Just before midnight, footsteps. Approaching our camp. I jumped up, flashlight blazing into the darkness. Danny, standing there, soaking wet, clothes ripped, eyes black as pitch. Maya rushed to him. Oh my God, Danny. Where have you been? He didn't answer. Mouth curled into this snarl. Before I could even react, he grabbed me. Throat. Slammed me back against a tree. Grip like iron. Maya screamed. I was coughing, struggling to pry his fingers loose. Danny, yeah. He was athletic, but never strong enough to pin me like this. Whatever had come back from that water wasn't Danny. Something else. Something within human strength. Somehow, I managed to knee him in the side. He stumbled back, just for a split second, releasing me. Maya grabbed the flashlight, swung it, cracked him across the back of the head. He staggered, eyes rolling, then bolted. Into the swamp. Unnatural speed. Gone. Darkness swallowed him again. We were both shaking. Jake, that wasn't him, Maya whispered. That was her. She didn't finish the sentence. Sleep. Forget about it. We decided to follow his muddy footprints at first light. They led us to it. Hidden among thick cypress roots. A dilapidated wooden structure. Old church. Caked in moss, streaked with black mold. Stench hit us the second we stepped inside. Rotten decay. Candles flickering in the corners, dripping wax onto the floorboards. More bones. More twisted symbols. And in the center of the room, Danny, bound to a post. Unconscious, head slumped forward, wrists tied with rope. I rushed over, checking his pulse. Faint. Maya searched the church, looking for anything. That's when the door slammed open behind us. Man in a wide, brimmed hat, deputy's badge glinting. Shotgun pointed right at me. Hands up, he growled. No. We raised our hands. Stepping back from Danny, my mind was racing. A cop? Out here? He flipped on an old lantern, face flickering into the light. Neem's Deputy Harold Knox. You two shouldn't have come here. Maya eyed the shotgun.
You're a cop. Help us!
Our friend, he sneered. I'm doing what needs to be done. Bruxer? I asked, trying to keep him talking. His eyes flickered with fear at the name. Been keeping her fed for years now, he muttered. Drifters, hikers, runaways, anyone nobody will miss. In return, she leaves the town alone. Blood went cold. He was helping that thing. Before we could react, more men stepped out of the shadows. Rifles, knives. They grabbed Maya and me, tied our wrists together. We struggled, but they were practiced. Dragged us to a corner, propped us against a rotted pew. One of the men, nasty-looking dude, pulled out a blade. Fish-gutting knife, probably. Advanced on us. Deputy Knox hovered near Danny. Found this one wandering the swamp, Knox said, nodding at our friend. But she wants more than one sacrifice tonight.
Wait.
Maya demanded. Why would you do this? Knox just shrugged. Better you than me. Everything went to hell. Training kicked in. I bucked my legs. Sent the armed dude flying backwards. Maya, journalist or not, wasn't some damsel. Kicked out at one of the guys holding her. But they overpowered us again. That's when Danny groaned. Lifted his head. Eyes flickered. Normal. Black. Like something was fighting for control inside him. Suddenly, he snapped the ropes. Like they were cotton thread. Lunged forward, beast speed. Clawing at Deputy Knox. Shotgun blast, deafening in the cramped space. Danny twisted aside, superhuman agility. Reached Maya, still tied up. Hissed. Before I could stop him, raked those claws, like nails across her thigh. Blood welled up. Her scream echoed off the church walls. I threw myself at Danny, tried to pin him. Growled. Guttural, inhuman sound. Arms like iron bars. Barely managed to lock him in a chokehold. Maya, trembling, freed one hand, then two. Fumbled in Danny's pocket. Pulled out the silver pendant. Hold him, she yelled. I tightened my grip. Desperate thrust. Maya jammed the pendant into Danny's chest. Howl ripped from his throat. Collapsed to his knees. The men who'd kidnapped us, they backed away. Terror in their eyes. Didn't understand the supernatural crap they'd been messing with. For a moment, Danny's eyes flickered back to normal. Maya Jakey, he gasped. I'm sorry. Then the whole church shuddered. Figure appeared at the edge of the lantern light. Ancient woman. Skin like rotted bark. Eyes glowing red. The Bruxer. Let out this ragged hiss that made the candles jump. Deputy Knox didn't wait. Bolted for the door. Lightning speed. Bruxer seized him. Dragged him into the darkness. Scream cut short. Wet crunch. Stench of blood filled the air. The other men scattered. Terrified. Outside. Night was eerily silent again. Like nothing existed but that cursed chapel. I managed to cut Maya's ropes. She pressed a hand to her bleeding thigh, face twisted in pain. Denny, she whispered. He groaned, still slumped. Pendant sticking out of his chest. Whatever hold the Bruxer had on him, it was strong. but the pendant seemed to weaken it. Monster stepped back into the lantern light, gaunt face twisted with rage. I scrambled to my feet, looking for a weapon. Eyes landed on it. Half-burnt torch in the corner. Can of gasoline. Creeps probably used it for torching evidence. The Bruxo advanced, voice rasping in Portuguese. Raised a hand. Pressure around my throat. Invisible fingers choking me. Maya crawled towards the can. Face pale, blood loss. Managed to tip it over. Gasoline splashed across the rickety pews. Soaked wood. She flicked her lighter, tossed it. Soaked wood, rotted walls. Dry floorboards, flames erupted. Like tinder. Bruxa shrieked, released me for a second. Cuffing, stumbling back from the heat. Thick smoke curling to the ceiling. Jake, help me get Danny. Maya cried. We each grabbed an arm, hauling him towards the exit. Beam crashed from the ceiling. Shower of sparks. Separated us from the Bruxa for a second. But even through the flames, I saw her. Hateful. Ancient eyes, glaring at us. Staggered outside. Humid night air. Firelight reflected off the black water. Swamp looked like the entrance to hell. For a moment, I thought we were free. Then Danny's body convulsed. Eyes still flickering, normal. Black, locked onto me. Voice came out in 2 layers. His own. Something else. She's not done with me. Pulled free of our grip. Stumbled back into the swamp. Tried to grab him. Mud was thick. Slipped. Scraped my palms on twisted roots. Danny vanished into the darkness. Swirling smoke. Final, half-human cry. I yelled his name until my voice was hoarse. Maya slumped against a cypress trunk. Tears streaming down her cheeks. Church was fully engulfed now. Flames roaring skyward. Smoke billowing. Beacon in the dead of night. If the Bruxa was still in there burning, or escaping, finding shelter deeper in the swamp. We had nothing left. No strength to chase Danny, or it. Then voices, flashing lights, cluster of men in suits, guns raised, approaching. Tried to stand, head spun, FBI patches on their jackets. Passed out. Woke up in a makeshift station, edge of the swamp. IV drip in my arm. Maya next to me, thigh bandaged. FBI agent by the door, arms crossed. Special Agent Gray. He introduced himself. Forced smile. You two have been through quite an ordeal. Told him everything. Rotting shack, old church, Bruxa, Deputy Knox's crimes. Agent Gray just nodded, taking notes. Assured us they'd be investigating. Something in his voice didn't believe him. Maya clutched my hand, desperate. Did you find Danny? Any sign of him? Agent Gray grimaced. We've scoured the area. No church. No bodies. No evidence. I'm sorry. Blunt my guess. They found plenty. Just wanted it quiet. Local authorities, some deal. FBI decided truth was too messy. Best interest to bury it. They let us go a few hours later. Practically shoved us out the door. Stern warnings to stay away. Maya's camera, memory cards gone. Our gear, silver pendant missing too. Like they wanted to erase everything we'd seen. Maya and I tried to follow up. Weeks. Searching records, contacting local news. Nobody wanted to talk. Deputy Knox declared, missing, presumed dead in a fire. No mention of a church. Or the men who kidnapped us. Definitely no witch demon. Every road dead end. Month later package. No return address. Inside. Photo. Danny. Standing knee deep in swamp water. Expression vacant, eyes black. Back of the photo, shaky handwriting. She's still hungry. Never shown that photo to anyone but Maya. We're both haunted. Possibility he's still out there. Trapped. Half-life. Under the Brux's control. 100 times I've asked myself, could I have done something different? Forced him away from the swamp when we saw the bones. Turned back the second things got weird. But the swamp, it had its hooks in us the moment we stepped foot in it. Wish I could say I don't wake up at night, hearing nails scratch at my door, faint whisper of my own voice from the trees outside my window. But I do. And every time I remember Danny's last words, his own voice. She's not done with me. Maybe she's not done with any of us. Woke up in a sweat again last night. Same dream. Cypress swamp. Firelight dancing on the black water, the church burning. And Danny's eyes switching back and forth, human to something else. It's been months, but it's like the swamp crawled under my skin. Maya, she gets it. We talk sometimes, late night calls, mostly just checking in, making sure the other one's still holding it together. Neither of us is sleeping right through the night anymore. Agent Gray and his FBI buddies, they buried it all. Clean sweep. No church. No bodies, no bruxer, no crazy cop, no nothing. Just a couple of city folks who got lost in the swamp, imagined things, and wandered back out. That's the official story anyway. But Maya and I, we know what we saw, what we felt. The photo that damn photo Danny sent, or whatever sent it. It's tucked away in a box now, buried under a pile of old army stuff. Can't bring myself to throw it out. Can't look at it for too long either. Sometimes, though, late at night, when the house is quiet, I swear I can hear a faint whisper, just like in the swamp. My name carried on the wind. Jake, come here. Then I'm wide awake, heart hammering, scanning the shadows, knowing it's just my head playing tricks, but still can't shake the feeling she's still out there. Waiting. Hungry. Maya. She tried to keep digging for a while. Contacted every local historian, swamp expert, weirdo legend hunter she could find. Hit brick wall after brick wall. Town folks clammed up tighter than oysters when she mentioned the bruxer, or disappearances, or anything swamp-related. FBI probably paid them a visit, told them to keep their mouths shut. Smart move, I guess, if you want to pretend nothing happened. But pretending doesn't make it go away. We even went back to Delaware, Maya and I. Sneaked back into the swamp a few weeks after they rescued us. Wanted to see something. Anything to prove it wasn't all just some fever dream. Swamp was empty, quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. No sign of the church, of course, like it had never been there. Ground was just mud and cypress knees, moss hanging heavy, water black as ink. Spooky as hell, even in broad daylight. We didn't stay long. Feeling of being watched was too strong. Like we were trespassing on something ancient and angry. Got the hell out of there before dark. After that, Maya kind of gave up on the story. No evidence, no witnesses, no backup from the FBI, no anything. Just two traumatized people and a photo that could be anything to anyone else. She started writing about something else, some political thing, safe and boring. Says she needed to get back to real life. I get it. But for me, real life, it feels different now. Like there's a shadow hanging over everything. A swamp shadow. Danny, that's the part that really messes me up. My buddy, gone. Swallowed by the swamp, or worse, still out there, changed. I replay it all in my head, every night before I try to sleep. What if I'd tackled him harder when he first went weird? What if we'd just left when we found the bones? What if I'd never agreed to go in the first place? What ifs are a bitch, man. They eat you alive. I try to keep busy. Security gigs, gym, trying to get back to some kind of normal routine. But normal, it's a joke now. Every creak in the house at night, every rustle of leaves outside the window, it makes me jump. Flashlights always charged, right next to my bed. Stupid, I know. Living in the city now, miles from any swamp. But the fear, it's not rational. It's swamp, deep. Maya calls, like I said. We talk about it sometimes. The swamp, Danny, the Bruxa. Mostly we just remember together. Nobody else would believe us anyway. Sounds like a crazy story, right? Witch, demon, possessed buddy, killer cops, FBI cover up.
Yeah.
Sounds insane when you say it out loud. But we saw it. We lived it. Last time I talked to Maya, she said she'd been having dreams too. Swamp dreams. Said she could smell the rot, hear the whispers, feel the cold water seeping into her bones. Said she woke up one night, convinced she could hear Portuguese being whispered outside her window. Just like Danny, just like in the swamp. Freaked her out bad. Me too, hearing that. Means it's not just in my head. It's something real. Something that followed us back. I don't know what happens next. Agent Gray said they'd condole it.
Yeah? Right?
Handle a centuries-old swamp demon. FBI ain't got a manual for that. Town's probably still making sacrifices, keeping the Bruxa happy, hoping she stays put. And Danny, he's out there, somewhere in that swamp, or somewhere else, under her control, waiting. Sometimes I think about that pendant Danny stole. Silver thing with those weird symbols. Maya jammed it into his chest, and it stopped him. For a minute. Weakened the Bruxa's hold, maybe. FBI's got it now, probably locked away in some evidence locker, gathering dust. Maybe they know what it is. Maybe they know more than they let on. But they ain't talking. And me, I'm just waiting. Waiting for the whispers to get louder. Waiting for the scratch of nails on the door to get closer. Waiting for the swamp to reach out and pull me back in. Because deep down, I know, she's not done with me. Not done with Maya. And definitely not done with Danny. She's still hungry. And the swamp always gets what it wants. My name's Mike, and yeah, Jace is just a nickname I picked up somewhere along the way. I'm 35 years old, and something messed up happened to me late last fall in Wren State Forest. Delaware. Seriously, I never want to see that place again. I'm writing this down because I need to get it out of my head, you know. Maybe if I tell someone, even just in writing, it won't drive me completely nuts. And maybe, just maybe, someone will actually believe me. See, I used to be in the military. Did a tour that left me with more baggage than I signed up for, mostly nightmares. After my discharge, I tried everything to get right again. Therapy, meds, you name it. Job after job, nothing really stuck. Couldn't shake this feeling. This tension that was always wound up tight inside me. Finally, I thought, screw it, I'm going to try something different. I decided to test myself, go out into the wild, see if nature could knock some sense into me, or at least give me a little peace. So, I planned a solo trip into Wren State Forest. Just me, my gear, and my dog Buddy. Buddy's a German Shepherd mix, about 4 years old. Loyal as hell. Back then, I figured the worst I'd have to deal with was a few ticks and maybe a black bear. Man, was I wrong. I had no clue what was really out there, lurking in those woods. I didn't know about that hungry thing waiting. I was filling up my truck at a gas station near Georgetown, Delaware, maybe 15 miles from the forest entrance, when I bumped into this guy Chad. He was kind of wary, late 20s maybe, decked out in hiking boots, cargo pants, and a T-shirt for some survivalist YouTube channel. The second he saw my gear in the truck bed, he's all over me, firing questions like crazy. Was I planning some big expedition? Did I have filming equipment? What route was I taking? I told him, nah man, no filming. Just looking for a quiet retreat. But this dude, he just lights up, like he smelled a chance. Survival vlogger here, he grins, way too wide. Been dying to test my skills in Wren. Something about him felt off, you know? Maybe too eager. Too intense. But I was in a decent mood, didn't want to be a jerk. He follows me into the convenience store, buying extra supplies. And who do we run into in the aisle? Another guy, Dave. He looked older than Chad, maybe my age, but worn down, like life had been rough. Dave seemed pretty chill, but it was like that easygoing vibe was just a thin cover. Chad, Mr. Enthusiastic, jumps right in, introduces himself, and pitches this idea of a group expedition. Dave hesitated, looked unsure, until Chad promised to cover the extra costs. Looking back, man, I was so dumb, getting roped into this so fast. Should have trusted my gut and just gone it alone. By mid-afternoon, we're caravanning into Wren State Forest. Chad's beat, up's UV tailing my truck, with Dave squeezed into the passenger seat of Chad's car. We parked near this beat, up trailhead, wasn't even on any official map. Perfect place to film. Chad's practically bouncing with excitement. Pristine, untouched. People eat that stuff up. He's loading his phone and camera gear into his backpack. Dave just had a simple hiking bag and a small tent. I tried to give them a heads up, told them the forest could be dangerous. Patchy cell service, unmarked trails, wildlife. Chad just waved it off with this big grin. Like every danger was just another click for his channel. We set up camp about an hour before sunset in a small clearing. I let Buddy run around while I got a fire going. Air was cold, biting cold for autumn. Dave offered to gather kindling, and Chad, naturally, is fiddling with his camera, narrating everything. We're deep in Wren, folks. Rumor has it, people disappear in these woods. Perfect place for an epic survival challenge. He winks, like he's trying to pull me into his little show. I just kept to myself, focusing on the tent pegs and the fire. That first night, nothing happened, uneventful. Chad filmed us eating canned beans, asked me a bunch of questions about my military service, which I mostly dodged. Around midnight, I heard Buddy growling in his sleep, but I just figured it was forest noises, you know. We woke up to a frosty dawn, and that's when things started to get weird. My compass was spinning all over the place, slow, erratic circles. GPS on my phone. No signal. Chad, of course, is bragging about how we didn't need technology. He's got an old school map. But even he started looking unsure as we got deeper into the woods. The forest itself felt different. Too quiet. Too still. Like every living thing knew something we didn't. Mid-morning, we stumbled into this clearing, unnaturally silent. Buddy whined, low and uneasy. Then the smell hit us. Rancid, metallic. About 20 yards in, we found it. A pile of bones. Deer bones mostly, but some were way too big. And they were stripped clean. Not a scrap of flesh left, arranged in a ring. A perfect circle. Chad's pointing his camera at the whole mess, whispering some dramatic crap about primal fear. I told him to cut the camera. Something about that bone circle felt wrong, deliberate, like a warning. I said we should turn back. Dave, surprisingly, agreed. His face was pale. But Chad, naturally, insisted we push on. He's saying we can loop around, find our way back to the trucks on a different route. Film more content. Buddy starts barking at something in the shadows, between the trees. I saw movement, a flash of something tall and gaunt. Limbs too long. Chad whips his camera around, but nothing's there. Just that creepy feeling of being watched. It was near twilight when we made camp again. Temperature dropped like a rock. I built a huge fire, trying to keep animals away, but we were all on edge. That night, Dave went to take a leak behind the trees. 10 minutes passed. 15. I called his name. Nothing. Chad and I grabbed flashlights, Buddy at my side, and started combing through the brush. We found Dave's footprints leading away from the site, but they just stopped near a rotting log. Buddy sniffed the ground, whined, and refused to go any further. We broadened our search. 15 minutes later, Chad shrieks. I rushed over and almost threw up. Sticking out from under a patch of moss was a severed human hand, half eaten. It looked like Dave's. The ring finger, silver with a turquoise stone, just like Dave's ring. I wanted to turn around, get to the authorities now. But Chad, he's freaking out. But not about Dave. He's saying we need to stay calm. It could be a coincidence. And then, he starts filming again, muttering about the possibilities. I couldn't believe my ears. Was he suggesting we keep going? Thunder rumbled, or maybe it was just the wind. Didn't matter. We were stuck. No choice but to ride out the night, in terror. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves made us jump. Eventually, I must have dozed off, but I kept my rifle close. Ex-military, remember? Wasn't going to let some animal, or maniac, get the drop on me again. I woke up to pain in my wrists. My head was pounding, and cold. Damp leaves were pressed against my face. For a second, I was totally disoriented. Then I tried to move my arms, and panic slammed into me. Couldn't move. My ankles were tied too. I blinked, trying to clear my head, and saw the fire, just glowing embers now. Chad was standing over me, camera in one hand, a length of rope in the other. His eyes were darting around, all wired and excited, like he'd finally lost it. Had to do it, man, he says, voice all shaky and hyped up. You wouldn't go along. People need to see the truth about what's out here. I spat at him, demanded he untee me. Buddy was nowhere in sight. Relax, Chad hisses, crouching down, filming my face in the dim ember light. Dog's in the tent. He's safe for now. Then he leans in closer to the camera, all conspiratorial. But we gotta lure it in. Lure what in? I rasped. My wrists felt like they were on fire. He'd used cheap plastic zip ties and some rope. He starts ranting, going on about watchers, about how something was stalking us. Claims he'd researched local legends. These forest, he whispers, voice trembling. They say it houses a Wendigo. Thrives on hunger and fear. He's looking right into the camera lens now, a mix of terror and this crazy excitement in his eyes. People are gonna eat this up online. Millions of views, exposing a real cryptid. He grabs me by my ankles, drags me over to a sturdy pine tree, and ties me there, arms pinned behind the trunk. My mind was spinning, pure fury and disbelief. Chad was using me as bait. Completely lost it, obsessed with getting his perfect footage. I screamed for Buddy, but Chad just shushed me. Dog'll blow our cover. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time just blurred, pitch black, except for the weak flicker of my lantern on the ground. My breath came in ragged puffs. Then I felt it, a cold wind, carrying this stench like rotting meat. Chad was still filming, panning his camera from the darkness to my face, whispering lunatic commentary. That's when I saw it. A figure in the gloom. Taller than any man, skeletal limbs, skin stretched tight over bones like wet parchment. Eyes glinting, like tiny, starving embers. Staring right at me. My heart hammered against my ribs as the creature stepped forward. Legs bending the wrong way, crackling with each movement. I tried to scream, but my throat just locked up. The Wendigo lurched closer to Chad, who fumbled, trying to keep his camera steady. And then, out of nowhere, Buddy barreled out of the darkness, barking, snarling, a fury of fur and teeth. He lunged at the creature's legs. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw fear flicker in those ember eyes. Then it whipped around with inhuman speed, knocked Buddy aside like he was nothing, and grabbed Chad by the shoulders. Chad shrieked, camera clattering to the ground. The Wendigo hoisted him into the air and vanished back into the shadows, carrying him like a rag doll. His screams faded, swallowed by the wind. My chest heaved, terror choking me, but I started wriggling, pushing my back against the tree trunk. I spotted Chad's dropped knife a few feet away. Twisting my body, scraping the rope against a jagged knot in the pine bark, I slowly sawed through the fibers. My wrists felt raw, but finally, the rope gave way enough for me to free one hand, then the other. I scrambled, hands shaking, until I found the knife and sliced through the zip ties on my ankles. "Buddy," I yelled. He limped to me, whimpering but alive. I checked him for wounds. Bruised but nothing broken, thank God. Relief and fury warred inside me. My best friend could have been killed. I scooped him up for a second, then we staggered away, my only goal to find a ranger station. A main road, anything to get out of there. Blood pounded in my head. Leaves and branches tore at my clothes. No compass, phone useless. I stumbled, half blind, through the forest, felt like hours, heading vaguely south. Dawn broke, a bleak grey light, showing unfamiliar territory. Stomach gnawing with hunger, body shaking from adrenaline and cold. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind me. I spun around, knife raised. Chad stepped out from behind a tree. First, a wave of relief washed over me, but it died instantly. He was bloodied, clothes shredded, eyes wide and wrong. Too dark. He moved awkwardly, arms hanging loose, like he didn't quite remember how to use them. "Mike," he said, but not in his normal voice, hollow, echoing. I saw a raw wound on the side of his neck, slowly oozing. He advanced slowly, and I backed away, body growling at my side. "You're alive," I stammered, not understanding how he'd escaped the Wendigo. Chad twitched, tilted his head unnaturally far, then repeated, "Mike," mimicking my voice. This time, the hair on my neck stood up. Buddy barked frantically, and then Chad lunged. Before I could react, he brandished a knife of his own, my missing hunting knife. The slash just missed my throat, but it cut across my shoulder, a hot line of pain. Buddy leaped, grabbing Chad's wrist. Chad howled, thrashing. Their combined weight crashed into me. We tumbled, my knife flying from my grasp. Pine needles, dirt, blood in my mouth. Chad pinned me, face inches from mine, eyes rolling back, mouth twisted into this sick grin. He hissed, in my voice, "Stay forever." But then Buddy latched his jaws onto Chad's forearm, freeing me just enough to scramble for the knife. But Chad tossed Buddy aside like a rag doll. Sickening crunch. He pinned the dog under his knee. I roared, tackled him, my shoulder screaming. When Chad turned to face me again, I saw it. Something monstrous flicker in his eyes. Something that wasn't Chad at all. I stabbed him in the chest. He hissed, a wet gasp. Blackish blood bubbling from his lips onto my arm. He smiled. That was the worst part. That final grin as his body went slack. He whispered, "You're next," in that layered, echoing voice. Then he died in my arms, blood pooling around us, soaking into the pine needles. I'm not proud of what I did, but I had no choice. He was possessed, infected, something beyond understanding. Buddy lay there whimpering. I crawled to him, checked for broken bones. He could stand shaky, but he stood. Tears blurring my vision, I gathered what was left of my gear. and Chad's camera still filming. In the screen's reflection, my face looked haunted, hollow. I slung my pack over my good shoulder and trudged on, with Buddy, leaving Chad's corpse behind. Couldn't bury him. Ground too hard. And I was half dead from blood loss myself. If I stayed, that thing would come back. Or maybe it was still inside him. Impossible to describe the state of my mind. Just raw survival instinct, and a horror so deep it felt like it would never leave me. Sometime later that day, I found a dirt road which led to a ranger station. Windows boarded up, but there was a working radio inside. Managed to call for help, voice shaking. Local sheriff's deputy showed up with 2 men in suits. Federal agents, they claimed. They took one look at me, covered in blood, loaded me into an unmarked car. Buddy too. I remember passing out on a stretcher. Woke up in a small hospital room. No markings on the walls, no staff ID badges. Stern man in a black suit questioned me. Never gave his name. Never showed a badge. Wanted details. Who was I with? What exactly happened? How'd I get my injuries? I demanded they find Dave's remains. Retrieve Chad's body. The man stared at me for a long time, expression unreadable, then scribbled some notes. Another agent, a woman, came in, looked at me with pity. We found no trace of anyone else in those woods, Mr. Holloway. Just you. Bullshit. I argued, shouted, told them about Chad's camera. They told me it was damaged. Blank. Insisted I must be confused. But I know they found the camera. They must have seen something on it. Why else lie? Eventually, they released me, strongly suggesting I leave Delaware. Gave me Buddy back, but kept my gear. Evidence. Knew it was a cover-up, but I was in no shape to fight. Before I left, the suited man looked me in the eye. You were alone in those woods, Mr. Holloway. Do you understand? I understood. They wanted silence. I'm sure they'd done this before. I went home. Small place in Maryland. Tried to piece my life back together. For days, I expected cops to knock, charging me with murder. Or maybe men in black suits would drag me away in the middle of the night. Neither happened. It was like the whole nightmare never occurred. Then, 2 weeks later, package at my doorstep. No return address. Inside, Chad's camera, fully intact. My heart pounded. Locked myself in my bedroom, turned it on. At first, footage was scrambled. Black, bits of Chad's recordings, him setting up the camera, talking survival tips. Then it cut to the night he tied me up. Lens focused on me, half conscious against the tree. Face twisted in anger as I realized it was all there. My kidnapping, the Wendigo's silhouette, even Chad being carried off. But then the footage jumped. Something else. Something I don't remember happening. Lens pointed at a figure standing in the dark, next to a tree. It was me, or looked like me, except the eyes were hollow, and the face is smiling. Same awful grin Chad had at the end. The figure raised a hand in a slow wave and said, in my voice, "You should have stayed. You were so close to being one of us." My stomach lurched. I dropped the camera. Checked the date stamp on that footage. Recorded 1 day after I left the forest. Impossible. I never went back there. stared at the camera in horror. Battery died soon after, like it just had enough juice to show me that last message. I buried the camera in a storage box, locked it away in my closet. Buddy, sensing my dread, whined, nuzzled my hand. I realized then I'd never fully escape what happened. I see that grin in every shadow, hear that voice in every wind gust. Sometimes I dream of the Wendigo's hollow eyes, wake up drenched in sweat, still smell that rancid stench. Told my neighbor I'm moving soon, maybe to the desert. No forests there. Hope to find a place beyond the reach of that hunger. But I fear, once you've encountered it, you can't run. It marks you, follows you. The authorities, or whoever they were, might keep it hidden from the public, but they can't hide it from me. I know the truth. There's something in Wren State Forest, something ancient and starved. It possessed Chad, took Dave, nearly consumed me. And it's still out there, waiting for anyone foolish enough to wander into its domain. Nightmares about going back, walking those trails alone, calling Buddy's name in the dark. Part of me wonders if it wants me to return, to finish what it started. Maybe it already has a piece of me. Maybe that's why the camera showed that. A version of me out there in the trees. I pray no one else ever stumbles upon that horror. This is my warning. If you ever find yourself near Wren State Forest, turn around. Don't go in. No matter what. I barely made it out alive. And I still might not truly be free. My name is Mike Jace Holloway. And this is what happened to me. If the day comes I vanish without a Tracy, you'll know why. But maybe I'll be the last victim. And that will be enough for now. I keep Buddy close, sleep with the lights on, and I wait for the day the forest calls me back, because deep down, I know it eventually will. My name's Alex, and I'm 27. Last fall, things got seriously messed up for me. It all started when I went to this beach in Delaware, called Rehoboth Beach, with my girlfriend, Sarah, and our buddy Ben. What we found there, man, it still gives me nightmares. It was just a few days, but those days flipped my life upside down. We headed out to Rehoboth on a Thursday afternoon. It was way past tourist season, so the place was practically deserted. The drive from Wilmington was nothing special. Just the three of us crammed in my old Jeep. We were loaded down with camping gear and enough instant food to last us the whole weekend. Sarah was stoked to get some photos of the old boardwalk. She's an artist, you know. Finds beauty in all these forgotten, run-down places. And this section of the boardwalk, the part that got wrecked in a storm, was supposed to be perfect for her next project. Then there's Ben, who's 30, but everyone calls him Jinx. He's way into conspiracy theories, hosts this little podcast about the paranormal. The dude was buzzing with energy the whole drive, glued to his phone, reading articles. According to him, people had gone missing around Rehoboth over the years. No bodies, no explanations. Just rumors about some ancient spirit hanging around, dragging people under the boardwalk to drown them in the shallows. Ben was convinced he was going to find some proof, boost his podcast's fame. You know how it is. Me, I just wanted to chill with Sarah. I'm not really into the supernatural stuff, but I do dig exploring abandoned places. The quieter the better. I like hearing my own footsteps echo in those old spots. The wind whistling where crowds used to be. There's this kind of sad peace in that emptiness, you know. We rolled into Rehoboth late afternoon. The main boardwalk was still in decent shape, but almost every shop was boarded up for the season. We set up our tents at this small campground, not too far from the water. It was chilly, and the wind coming off the ocean cut right through your clothes. Darkness came quick, so we figured we'd wait until morning to check out the abandoned section. That night, we huddled around this weak campfire. The talk turned to local legends, of course. Ben was telling us how every few years, someone vanishes from this stretch of beach, especially around the old boardwalk. Some bodies would wash up eventually, lungs empty like they drowned on dry land. Others just disappeared, gone for good. Sarah was listening, eyes wide, glancing at me every now and then, like she needed a reality check. I tried to play it cool, downplay the stories, but honestly, I felt this heavy, unsettling feeling creeping in. We crashed in our tents around midnight, the wind flapping the tent walls. I was just drifting off when I heard Sarah's voice through the nylon. "Alex," she whispered. "Did you say something?" "Nope," I mumbled, half asleep. But I could have sworn I heard whispering outside, like a voice on the wind. I told myself it was just the waves and finally drifted into a restless sleep. Next morning, we ran into someone unexpected near the campground parking lot. This woman, maybe late 30s, dressed casual, but had this air of authority about her. She introduced herself as Agent Miller, said she was on leave from her government job, visiting friends. Her SUV was parked nearby, packed with gear. She seemed real interested in our campsite, said she might join us exploring later if we didn't mind. Ben's eyes lit up. Chance to share his theories, right? Agent Miller listened. Polite, asked a few questions about the legends, then made a quick excuse about meeting someone. Something about her, though. It set off alarm bells in my head. I had no clue who she really was, or why she was so interested in us. We headed towards the abandoned boardwalk around midday. Sky was grey, looked like a storm was brewing. The smell of rotting wood and seaweed got stronger as we got closer. Sections of the boardwalk had just collapsed into the sand, jagged planks and holes showing dark water underneath. Rusty nails and moldy beams sticking out everywhere, like broken bones. We moved slow, boots crunching on the debris. Sarah started snapping photos right away, capturing the creepy beauty of the twisted railings and half-buried posts. Ben was filming little clips for his podcast. I wandered ahead, checking the planks for weak spots. The wind howled under the old structure, sending shivers down my spine. I just couldn't shake this feeling. Then it happened. I stepped on this plank, looked rotten, and it just gave way. I went down, leg dangling over dark, cold water. Heart skipped a beat. Then, I felt something grab my ankle, like a hand, clammy and impossibly strong. I yelled for help, and Ben lunged forward, pulled me up. For a split second, I glanced down. Nothing but murky water. But the pressure on my ankle, it was still there. Then, just like that, it vanished. Ben dragged me to safety, my heart pounding, gasping for air. What the hell was that? Ben hissed, face pale. Something grabbed me, I said, voice shaking. My pant leg was soaked. I rolled it up. Saw these dark bruises wrapped around my ankle, shaped like fingers. Sarah stared, horrified. Could have been a branch, she offered, voice weak, but she didn't sound convinced. We got away from that spot, kept exploring, but man, my nerves were shot. Not long after, this figure just appears out of the dunes. Agent Miller said she'd found us by following our footprints in the sand. I saw her eyes flick down to my ankle. When I told her what happened, her jaw tightened. Strange, she said, forcing a smile. Might be debris shifting under there. She didn't sound like she believed it. And neither did I. That evening, back at the campground, the mood was tense. Ben was totally convinced we'd run into something supernatural. Sarah tried to stay calm, but I saw her hands shaking every time she looked at my bruises. Agent Miller joined us by the campfire for a bit, listening to us talk. Asked a lot of questions. How we felt, what we heard, if we sensed anything else under the boardwalk. It hit me then. She was way more than just some tourist. When she made an excuse to make a phone call, Ben leaned in, whispering, "I bet she's undercover FBI. Maybe they've covered up all kinds of weird stuff around here." I almost laughed, but my ankle was throbbing, reminding me we'd already stumbled into something messed up. Maybe Ben's paranoia wasn't so crazy after all. That night, I slept like crap. Wayne never stopped. Every gust sounded like whispers through the tent walls. Around 3 a.m., I jolted awake. Sarah's sleeping bag was empty. Panic hit me. I unzipped the tent, stumbled out into the freezing wind. "Sarah," I yelled. Silence. Then, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Ben, looking messed up, wild-eyed. "She's gone," he said. I woke up, heard footsteps. We searched the campsite. Any sign of her? Nothing. No footprints, no note. Finally, we checked the beach. Moon peeked through the clouds, lighting up the sand. That's when we saw her silhouette. Lone figure at the water's edge. "Sarah!" I shouted, relieved. She was knee-deep in the waves, facing out to sea. We sprinted towards her, sand slowing us down. As soon as we got close, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her shoulders were shaking, and she didn't react when I called her name. Moonlight hit her face. My stomach twisted. Her eyes were pitch black. No iris, no whites, just darkness. Then, a voice came from her lips, but it wasn't her voice. Low, raspy, almost gurgling. "Come with us," it said. I froze. Ben swore under his breath. Then Sarah lunged, grabbed my collar, pulled me into the freezing water. Unnatural strength. I fought to stay above the waves, but she was trying to hold me under. Salt water burned my nose, lungs screaming. Ben tackled her, and we all went under in a furious splash. By the time I dragged myself back to shore, coughing, sputtering, Ben had pinned Sarah down. She snarled, thrashed, then suddenly went limp. Passed out, like someone flipped a switch. Moonlight showed her face again. Eyes back to normal, wide, confused. She blinked at me, shivering. Alex, what's going on? We had no answers. Then Agent Miller appeared, flashlight bobbing across the sand. She took in the Sceen water dripping off us, Sarah shaking on the ground. Her face hardened, reached into her jacket, pulled out a gun, leveled it at Sarah. Stay back, she demanded. I'm not gonna hurt anyone, but you all need to move away from her. Now. Are you insane? I snapped, stepping forward. She's not a threat. Agent Miller's voice was cold. You think you know what's happening here, but you don't. Step away. Ben glared at her. FBI, he spat, water dripping from his hair. She didn't say yes or no, just holstered her gun when she saw Sarah wasn't attacking anymore.
Trust me,
Agent Miller said. There's more going on than you realize. We practically dragged Sarah back to the tents. She was exhausted, barely able to walk. Voice still shaky, like she was fighting off a nightmare. Agent Miller shadowed us, face grim. Finally, she turned to Ben and me. There have been disappearances here for decades, she said quietly. We've documented them, tried to figure it out. Nobody wants it public. All we know is, there's something under that boardwalk. Some call it the drowning man. Ben's face lit up, terrified wonder in his eyes. The drowning man, he repeated. Agent Miller went on. I'm not even supposed to be here. My superiors want this kept quiet. People would panic if they thought there was a real phenomenon. But I couldn't leave it alone. If I can just get proof, maybe we can contain it. By then, I was shaking, fear and anger mixed together. Contain it. Are you even listening to yourself? Something possessed my girlfriend. Agent Miller exhaled, sharp, like she was forcing down her own panic. We need to stay together, she said, ignoring my outburst. If it tries to get one of you alone again, we might lose you. We agreed to keep watch through the night. Ben and I took shifts, while Agent Miller stayed on edge, pacing with that gun at her side. Sarah slept restless, sometimes moaning in her sleep. Around dawn, Ben bolted upright from his sleeping bag, grabbed my arm. Alex, do you hear that? A muffled voice echoed outside the tents. Sounded like me, calling Ben's name. But I hadn't said anything. We went out to check, hearts pounding. Nothing. Just the wind. Slow crash of the waves. That morning, we found this old newspaper clipping Ben had printed before the trip. Documented a case from the 70s. Man vanished near the same section of boardwalk, found 2 days later washed up on the beach. Lungs perfectly dry. Autopsy inconclusive. Another victim, woman in the 80s, found inside a boarded up shack under the pier. Skin gray, bloated, water oozing from her mouth, but no water source at the scene. Agent Miller read the article, jaw tight. They all died the same way, she muttered, or disappeared completely. Only clue is, it's connected to the water under the boardwalk. A force that shouldn't exist. We call it an evil spirit, maybe a demon. All I know is, it's real. Desperate for answers, we decided to go back to the boardwalk in daylight, hoping light might help. We could learn something without risking another night encounter. Sarah insisted on coming, even though I was worried about her blacking out again. The abandoned boardwalk looked even more sinister in the grey morning light. Rotting planks jutted out like broken teeth. Agent Miller said she had some device in her SUV might help. Some kind of high-frequency generator used in special cases. Ben and I exchanged uneasy looks, but we were out of options. She ran back to get it while we waited. Ben started filming a segment for his podcast. Could tell he was on edge, but excited too. We're at the infamous abandoned boardwalk of Rehoboth Beach, he said to his phone. Location of mysterious disappearances spanning decades. Suddenly, his phone beeped. Expression turned nervous. Battery's dying. Way too fast, he mumbled. I charged it last night. Sarah wandered closer to the edge of the collapsed planks. I moved to follow her. Shape flickered beneath the water. Just for a second. My mind raced, half expecting some pale, waterlogged face to surface. But just black water, sloshing against the barnacled beams. Agent Miller came back, carrying this metal box with a speaker thing attached. Fiddled with knobs, set it on a stable part of the boardwalk. Piercing hum filled the air, rising in pitch, had to cover my ears. Then, this sound, like a guttural roar, came from under the planks. Water surged up, splashing through the gaps. Sarah screamed, stumbled back. Agent Miller twisted a dial, hum got louder. Something started pounding against the underside of the wood. Blow after blow, each one harder, like an animal trapped in a cage. Then, the board started to crack. Shut it off, I yelled.
It's gonna collapse.
Agent Miller hesitated, then twisted the dial back. Hum died down, pounding stopped. Just that creepy whisper of water again. The old boardwalk groaned, but held. We stood there, stunned silence, hearts hammering. We'd definitely pissed off whatever was down there. That was insane. Ben breathed, shaking so bad he almost dropped his phone. Sarah clung to me, face ashen. Agent Miller just stared at the water. Grim look on her face. It's stronger than I thought, she admitted. I was hoping the device would hurt it, drive it away. Instead, just made it angrier. We need to leave, Sarah urged, voice trembling. We need to go now. Ben looked torn. Wanted his evidence, but even he could see how dangerous things had become. We turned to go. And that's when everything went completely wrong. Screeching wind rattled the beams overhead. Boards swayed under our feet. Ben, bringing up the rear, paused to grab his camera bag. Wet, slimy hand burst through the planks under him, wrapped around his leg. He shouted, dropped his bag in terror. Ben, I yelled, rushing back. Sarah screamed as more hands appeared, like half-rotted corpses, crawling up from the water. Except they weren't corpses. They moved, purposeful. Eyes black, empty. Ben was yanked down. Brutal jerk. knocked me off balance. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, but his body was being swallowed by a gap in the boards. Agent Miller aimed her gun at the writhing limbs, fired. Once, twice. Shots echoed across the beach. Did nothing. Ben's scream cut off as he was pulled under. Water exploded below in a froth of movement. I stared into his wide, terrified eyes as he disappeared. Then silence. No body surfaced, no clothing, no trace. Sarah dropped to her knees, sobbing. I scrambled to the edge, trying to see him, anything. Nothing but swirling black water. Agent Miller stood there, breathing hard, gun smoking. We waited, hearts in our throats. Ben never came back up. We stumbled away from the boardwalk in a daze. Eventually made it back to our campsite, but man, a million thoughts were just swirling in my head. Shock at losing Jonah. Guilt that I couldn't save him. Terror at whatever the hell was lurking under that cursed boardwalk. Sarah was a mess, inconsolable. Arms wrapped around herself, rocking back and forth. Agent Miller was pacing, hair all messed up, phone glued to her ear. She was calling someone, had to be her bosses. Yeah, she snapped into the phone. He's gone. No, we have no body. I told you we needed backup. We can't contain it. Pause. Then she just threw the phone down in frustration. Looked at me, eyes hollow. They won't send help, she said. They'd rather keep it quiet. Fewer casualties, that way if we leave now, they'll just bury this under red tape. But I can't do that. Not after what I've seen. If we leave it, others will die. Suddenly, rage just surged through me. You let him die, I screamed. He was grabbed, and you shot at it, and it did nothing. What do you want from us now? Agent Miller's face twisted, mix of remorse and determination. We can't leave this thing to kill anyone else. I can't leave it. Sarah's voice, weak and hollow, cut through the tension. What if we're next? She whispered. It possessed me. It took Jonah. It's only a matter of time before it gets us all. I had no answer. We just sat there in the cold wind, re-evaluating everything. Eventually, Agent Miller convinced us that the only way to stop this nightmare was to lure it out again. But be better prepared this time. Part of me thought she was insane, but another part knew we were already in too deep. That evening, as darkness crept across the sky, we stood near the water's edge again. Agent Miller had rigged that device to a portable battery. Explained, if we could lure the thing onto shore, if it took a physical form long enough, we might be able to hurt it. Maybe even destroy it, or at least injure it enough so it couldn't keep hunting. Sounded like a wild plan, but we were out of options. Sarah looked drained, eyes haunted. She insisted on staying close to me. That presence within her, it felt like it was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. She'd sometimes mutter in a voice that wasn't hers, then snap back to normal, trembling.
Okay,
Agent Miller said, flicking the power switch. The hum filled the air again, echoing off the water. I held Sarah's hand, heart pounding. If anything went wrong, I was ready to get us the hell out of there. At first, nothing. Then, the ocean started to churn under the moonlight. Waves lapped at the shore, getting stronger. Agent Miller turned the dial. The hum rose in pitch. My ears rang. The water near the shore frothed and boiled, like something massive was thrashing underneath. Suddenly, Sarah collapsed, clutching her head. She started screaming, her voice overlapping with that horrible guttural tone I'd heard before. Agent Miller cursed, backed away, device still in her hand. I dropped to my knees next to Sarah, trying to calm her. Then her eyes snapped open. Pitch black again. Wasn't Sarah anymore. Something else. Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't hers. She grabbed my wrist, nails digging into my skin. Then she spoke, voice distorted. I will take you all, one by one. Agent Miller raised her gun, looking torn. The entity inside Sarah let out this screech, rattled my bones. An unseen force slammed into Agent Miller, knocked her onto the sand. She lost her grip on the device, and it rolled away, the hum sputtering. Sarah rose to her feet, inhuman strength, towering over me, limbs moving jerky, unnatural. Reached down, grabbed my collar, eyes blazing. Join Jonah, she rasped. I clenched my fists, tears blurring my vision. Sarah, fight this, I cried. You have to. Her body seized. For an instant, her eyes flickered back to normal. Alex, she whimpered. Help me, I can't. Then, the blackness returned. Agent Miller lunged for the device, but this invisible force yanked her away. She fired 2 shots into the air, either to scare the entity or just pure desperation. Gun clicked empty. Next moment, a wave surged across the beach, smashed into her, dragged her towards the boardwalk. I watched her vanish under the swirling water, screaming for help. I froze, torn between saving Agent Miller and trying to protect Sarah. Decision was made for me. Sarah's possessed body slammed into me. Violence I didn't know she was capable of. Drove the wind out of my lungs. Pinned me against the sand, pressing my head down until water rushed around my face. Salt water filled my mouth, fighting for air. Vision blurred. I was gonna drown right there, on the beach. With my free hand, I fumbled for something, anything. Fingertips brushed the device, half buried in wet sand. I grabbed it, surge of adrenaline, jammed it against Sarah's shoulder, flipped the switch to maximum power. The hum roared out, shrieking through the night. She screeched in pain, rearing back like burned by a hot poker. Water exploded everywhere. For a moment, I saw something. Flicker of something large, serpentine, coiled behind her, like a shape made of black water and shadow. Then the wave receded, and Sarah crumpled, unconscious. I cuffed, choking on salt water, gulping air. Agent Miller was gone. No sign of her on the beach. I stared at the dark waves, half expecting her to resurface. But she never did. Didn't know if she was alive, if she'd been dragged under, or if something else had claimed her. The gun lay abandoned in the sand. Trembling arms, I pulled Sarah away from the shoreline. She was breathing, but barely. Eyes fluttered open, normal again. Tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she sobbed. It's still inside me. I pulled her close, whispering, "It's okay. We'll get help." "Will." New wave thundered onto the shore, almost knocked us over. I grabbed the device again, but it sparked, died. Water shorted out the circuitry. We stumbled to our feet and ran. Left Agent Miller and the broken machine behind. By the time we got back to the campsite, it was nearly dawn. Neither of us could function. I knew we had to get out of Rehoboth. Jeep's engine stuttered to life. We sped away, not looking back at the wind-torn beach. We reached the outskirts of town as the sun started to rise. Then, police cars just zipped by in the opposite direction, sirens blaring. That's when it hit me. Agent Miller had fired her weapon. Someone must have reported gunshots. I wanted to turn back, explain what happened. But what could I even say? That my friend was dragged to a watery grave by an evil spirit under the boardwalk. That an FBI agent was pulled under the waves, body never found. No way. I drove north on the highway. Sarah was silent in the passenger seat, head against the window, breathing shallow, eyes half closed. Every so often, she'd just shudder and mutter in that twisted voice, then snap back, looking lost. We needed medical help bad, but I didn't know where to take her that wouldn't lead to a million questions. I just wanted to protect her. We ended up at this dingy motel miles away. Got Sarah settled in, then tried to get my head straight. My ankles still had those dark bruises where that thing grabbed me. Wrists were scratched up from Sarah's attack. She was drifting in and out of feverish dreams, whispering about black water and voices calling her name. Around noon, I got her to eat a little. She seemed calmer, more lucid. "Alex," she whispered, "promise me something. If it takes me again, don't let it win." Tears stung my eyes. "I promise," I said, not even sure what that meant. That night, the nightmares came for me. Jonah's wide, terrified eyes as those hands dragged him under. Agent Miller's screams fading into gurgling silence. Sarah's possessed stare, black and empty. I woke up in a cold sweat, only to see Sarah's bed empty. Heart leaped into my throat. Bathroom door was open. She stood in front of the mirror, face wet, hair dripping. Turned, met my gaze. Eyes were normal again, but I saw that haunted look. Didn't say a word, just fell into my arms, sobbing. "I heard something calling me," she confessed. Felt like hands were reaching through the mirror. And next morning, we left for home. Exhausted, traumatized. I tried to rationalize everything, telling myself we'd never go back to Rehoboth again. But deep down, I knew the nightmares wouldn't end so easily. Whatever entity we'd angered, it was still out there. Jonah was dead. Agent Miller vanished. No closure. Just this gaping wound of uncertainty. Back home, local news ran a brief story. 2 individuals missing near Rehoboth Beach, believed drowned. Police found bullet casings on the shore. No mention of the bizarre events. No mention of Jonah or Agent Miller by name. It was like none of us had ever been there. No official statements, no interviews. Nothing. About a week later, unmarked sedan shows up at my apartment building. Man in a suit, flanked by another dude in dark sunglasses, cornered me in the hallway. Spoke calm, said he was with the FBI. Knew my name, birthday, everything. Mr. Reynolds, he said. It's in everyone's best interest that you forget what you think you saw. I protested, tried to tell him about Jonah, about Agent Miller. He just ignored me. I'm sorry for your losses, but we have no record of an Agent Miller. People disappear sometimes. You don't want to get involved. That night, I was too scared to sleep. Kept the lights on, TV playing low in the background. Sarah stayed on my couch, haunted look in her eyes. We hardly spoke. What could I say? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that faint whisper of waves crashing, felt the cold grip of unseen hands on my ankle. Few days later, Sarah insisted on going back to her own place. We hugged in silence, watched her drive away, wondering if we could ever have a normal life again. Tried to text her later, no answer. Anxiety gnawing at me. Drove by her apartment that evening. Rang the buzzer, no response. Finally, I let myself in with the spare key she'd given me months ago. Apartment was dark, lights off. Water pooled on the floor near the bathroom, soaking the hallway rug. Heart pounded as I followed the trail of water to her bedroom. She was gone. Her phone lay on the bed, still on. Single wet footprint stained the sheets, leading towards the open window. I ran to the window, looked out into the quiet street. No sign of her. No sign of a break-in. Sarah. I shouted her name until my voice broke. Only silence answered. In that moment I knew. The ocean had called her back. That entity had claimed her for good. Or maybe she'd been forced to meet it halfway. Chest constricted with loss, terror. I called the police, but they brushed it off. Another adult choosing to leave. My guilt just ate me up. I promised her she wouldn't lose the fight, and I failed. Weeks passed. Quit my job. Had nothing left but nightmares and this faint, stupid hope that Sarah might still be out there. One night, dozing in front of the TV, I heard a knock at the door. Heart leaped. Maybe she'd come back. Rushed to open it. Sarah stood there, hair plastered to her face, dripping water onto the hallway carpet. Soaked to the bone, clothes clinging to her skin, but no warmth in her eyes. Only that endless blackness. She smiled, lips trembling. Alex, she whispered, voice distorting. It's so cold. Let me in. My legs turned to rubber. Took a step back, shaking. Hope and dread mixed together. Overhead light flickered, casting shadows across her pale features. She stepped forward, crossed the threshold. Water dripping heavy droplets onto the floor. I tried to say her name, voice caught in my throat. That's when I knew. It wasn't Sarah. Not anymore. Not entirely. Her eyes gleamed with the same darkness that took Jonah. The same darkness that nearly drowned me under those rotten planks. Smell of salt water filled the air. I'm not sure what happened next. Maybe I ran. Maybe I screamed. All I know is everything went black. By the time I came to, the hallway was empty. Only evidence of her presence, a single wet footprint on the linoleum. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing. Terror, heartbreak, utter confusion. Next day, I tried to find anyone who would listen. Local police, private investigators, even the press. No one believed my story. Dismissed it as trauma-induced paranoia. I stopped trying, partly because I felt the feds, or whoever was behind the cover up, breathing down my neck now. Now, I just exist in this kind of limbo, waiting for the next knock at the door, waiting for the next wave of nightmares. I don't know if I'll ever see Sarah again, or if she's truly gone. But one thing I'm certain of, whatever evil lurks beneath that abandoned boardwalk in Rehoboth Beach, it isn't done with me. I can still hear it in my dreams, whispering through crashing waves, calling my name with a voice that almost sounds like hers. And God help me, some nights I think I want to answer.